Forum. My name is Dr. Patricia Prado Olmos, and I'm the Vice President for Community Engagement here at Cal State San Marcos. For the fourth consecutive year, I am honored to be the MC for this amazing event. I have to admit that I am particularly excited to be with you today. Amidst tragedy and turmoil, it is especially refreshing, comforting, and invigorating to be among colleagues united in a common purpose and with eyes firmly focused on the future. And yesterday, when we were doing the last-minute preparations, we were taking a look at everyone who would be here. And we noticed and were impressed, and I don't know if the word is comforted, but had a sense of satisfaction that there's an incredible diversity of women represented here. We come from different campuses, from different positions, backgrounds, and experiences. And so it's really good to see all of us here together, united, and keeping our eyes on the horizon. We will talk today about both the progress we are making and the challenges that still lie ahead. Our hope is that this day of conversation and connection will uplift and motivate, and that we will emerge ready to continue our efforts towards parity. We start the day with a compelling keynote presentation by filmmaker Tiffany Shlain. Following Tiffany's talk, we will hear from 3 distinguished presidents in our signature fireside chat, and it's actually a little bit chilly out this morning, so it makes our fireside chat sensible. And this year's panel's theme is Challenges and Imperatives, so you can anticipate a dynamic and engaging discussion. The afternoon will feature a lunch, and we'll have a guided conversation during our lunchtime. And we'll end the program by coming together for sharing and sense-making. So as we begin, as always, I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. The restrooms, I'm sure if you haven't noted, are located outside the ballroom and off to the right. To be kind to our speakers and your fellow forum attendees, I would ask that you please double-check that you have silenced your cell phones and other electronic devices. We do, however, of course, encourage you to take photos and tweet your experience today with the hashtag that's up on the screen, and help us spread the word about the forum and our network. So now, it is my distinct pleasure to invite to the podium the presidential sponsor for the ACE Women's Network Southern California, CSUSM President Dr. Karen Haynes. President Haynes is now the most senior president in the 23-campus California State University system. She is the first woman to hold this position of distinction. You can read more about her extensive professional accomplishments in your program, including her recent recognitions as Woman of the Year, Cool Woman of the Year, President of the Year, and Power Broker. Suffice it to say, President Haynes is a consummate trailblazer. And as she's blazed those trails, she's never wavered in her pursuit of the success of other women. In that spirit, shortly after she arrived here at CSUSM, Dr. Haynes reinvigorated the Southern California ACE Women's Network. President Haynes embodies the mission of the ACE Women's Network and works tirelessly to move the needle for women in higher education. She has created an exemplary campus culture, one of which I am proud to be a part, in which women are truly thriving and advancing to the highest levels of leadership. Without further ado, please allow me to present to you the woman I am really lucky to call boss, CSUSM's longest-serving president and our network's presidential sponsor, President Karen Haynes.
So welcome or welcome back to Cal State San Marcos. I am, as you know, always delighted to both welcome people to Cal State San Marcos and to be at this event among a group of talented women, as Patricia said, across institutional types, positions, and with all kinds of experiences in their background. I'm pleased to have been the presidential sponsor for the Southern California ACE Women's Forum, and that this is our 7th annual conference, here to share experiences and commitment to inclusion and climbing the leadership ladder. I look forward to this event, truly do, every year, because I know that professional networks are an important part of a successful leader. And through groups like ACE Women's Network, women leaders have access to the resources, support systems that they need. It will, perhaps more than ever, take our collective effort to continue to move that needle toward change. While it is inspiring to see our growing members, our mutual commitment to higher education, and our shared determination to lead, I know that it is both our duty and our reward as female leaders to embolden and mentor those who will come after us. Yesterday morning, I heard Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, and you know, the author of Lean In, Women Work and the Will to Lead, quoted, and while I might slightly paraphrase, a male reporter said, given that there was a document released that now said that 10% of all corporate CEOs in the US were female, did she think that that was progress? Her response, spoiler alert, the world is still controlled by men and things aren't going so well. So this conference, as always, is timely, allows us to speak openly, to celebrate our individual and collective achievements, to exchange practices, lessons learned, share in good humor, in that good humor, in fact, that gets us through all of this. As you know, and as Patricia mentioned, the ACE Women's Network is especially meaningful to me. I actually launched the Texas Network in the 1990s and then helped revive the Southern California Network about 10 or more years ago. I've spent 4 decades in higher education, including 23 years now as a university president. And while I have personally seen the impact of our collective progress, you all know there is still much work to be done in higher education. I am compelled to brag that 52% of the California State University system's 23 presidents are now female. Yes. A significant improvement, considering that when I arrived in 2004, it was the first time in our system's history that there were 4 female presidents. And unfortunately, that remained true until fairly recently. But the 2017 ACE Presidential Survey shows that women in all sectors of higher education still make up less than 30% of university presidents, and that figure has stuck between 25 and 30 for more than 2 decades. The numbers are even bleaker, no surprise, for Hispanic women, whose representation actually fell in national presidencies from 7% to 3% over a 10-year period. Though we have a long way to go to reach ACE's moving the needle goal of having half of college presidents held by women by 2030, there is also unprecedented opportunity ahead of us. More than 60% of sitting presidents are 61 or older, which means we have a chance to shape the leadership of our country's universities over the next decade. The presence, or in this case also absence, of female academic leaders has far-reaching influence on universities. To promote change, we must sit at the table, not at the sidelines. We must speak up, and when needed, speak over our male counterparts. Having spent more than 30 years in academic leadership, I have worked to move that needle toward change by creating opportunities for others. Last year, as Patricia said, I became the senior president of the CSU system. As you may know, the CSU system is the largest public comprehensive university system in the nation. So if we can begin to change the needle as we seemingly are in the CSU, maybe we collectively in the CSU can also have an impact. I am surprised, I would say, to be the senior president of the CSU 23 presidents because I never aspired to be a president at all. Some of you have heard the story, but in 1995, after serving for a decade as the first female administrator at the University of Houston, the dean of the Graduate School of Social Work, I received an unexpected opportunity to become the interim president of the University of Houston, Victoria. After nearly 9 years there, I became the third president and first female president here at Cal State San Marcos in 2004. And this fall, am completing my 14th year here, now being here more than half the lifetime of this still young university. Thank you. In these 23 years, I have hoped that my path, my experiences, my ACE work, and beyond helps provide some inspiration, some lessons learned, some mentoring, and clearly the continued clarion call about ongoing gender disparity in higher education leadership. In many ways, being bold and taking calculated risks is what allows me at CSUSM to succeed. And it has allowed me to foster an environment that has tried to even the playing field, both for our students and our employees. Here at CSUSM, we have a long-standing commitment to diversity, educational equity, and social justice. We model these principles by reaching out to educationally at-risk student populations, focusing on diversity in our recruitment of faculty. Today, not unlike a lot of the CSUs, 60% of our students and more than 50% of our tenure-track faculty members are women. Not only that, 60% of our vice presidents and deans are female as well. Your presence here today, your commitment and dedication to accelerating our progress with purpose inspires me to try to do even more. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the future generation of women leaders and to our students to continue to push for equality, to continue the push for recognition of our work, to continue the push for practices that embrace and respect our talents, and continue to push for equal pay. Many of us have pushed the glass ceiling up or created some cracks in it. We have persevered. We have proven that women thrive in leadership positions and that leadership matters. More than ever, we each need to continue to do our part, to keep walking the talk, to keep climbing the ladder, to keep reaching back with a hand to those behind us. Together, we must keep opening so many doors, reaching and pushing down so many barriers, and continuing to make it easier and easier for talented women to succeed. Together, we can move that needle toward change, and we must. Thank you.
Okay, that's a long walk across that stage. So thank you, President Haynes, for that warm welcome and for providing an inspirational launch for the day ahead. It is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Tiffany Shlain. Honored by Newsweek as one of the women shaping the 21st century, she is a filmmaker, public speaker, writer, founder of the Webby Awards, and co-founder of the International Academy of Digital Arts and Sciences. She has been invited to advise former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and the U.S. State Department uses her films to represent America at embassies around the world. Tiffany has received over 80 awards and distinctions during the course of her career for her work as a filmmaker, artist, internet advocate, leader, and activist. Tiffany opened her film studio and lab, the Moxie Institute, in 2006. The Moxie Institute films and discussion programs have been used to spark dialogues about social issues in many diverse settings, such as universities, conferences, governments, and entertainment. These films have been singled out by the New York Times, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and the Sundance Institute for their cutting-edge work using documentaries and internet distribution in unique ways to engage audiences. Tiffany is a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, where she received her BA in film theory. She studied organizational change at Harvard Business School Executive Education Program and film production at New York University's Sight and Sound program. Tiffany is also a Henry Crown Fellow of the Aspen Institute. Tiffany and her husband have 2 children and live in Northern California. At dinner last night, we were talking about where she's living and the fires that are there and the impact that's being felt all across Northern California. So I'm very appreciative that Tiffany fit us into that very busy and kind of very different sort of existence right now. So Tiffany, welcome.
It's great. I love being in a room with powerful women, especially after this week with the Weinstein scandal. All I've wanted to do is be in a room with powerful women because I've been so frustrated. I have to also say that my 8-year-old daughter dressed me for this. And I just showed her Grease for the first time, and she was like, "Mom, you gotta wear that. It's like what Sandra Dee wears at the last." I got you. And I really feel that way, because it's a long walk, but I'm gonna use it with my fancy new pants. And yes, it's also great to be here, because it's very scary. I'm in Marin County. We are 5 cities away from the fire, and it's just, it's feeling biblical these days. That is the way I feel. It's just between Vegas and the earthquakes and the fires, and I'm just like, I don't know, but I know, what I do know is when you get a group of powerful women together, amazing things happen. So this was like, I was looking forward to this so much because I need some inspiration, and I know that this room can make a lot of things happen. So I'm going to give you some background on my career and things I'm working on now, and then a project that I'm super excited to engage you on because we can all move the needle together. So Tiffany Shlain, you know, there's actually you can tweet, but I don't know if anyone's been following the news, but after Rose McGowan was suspended and Trump hasn't been, there was some talk of protesting Twitter, but I don't want to ruin that for your tweeting momentum today. But I want you to be aware, because you should, as feminists, know that that is also happening today. And I'm going to give you kind of where I come from. I always think of myself as like the 2 DNA. Filmmaking and technology has always been my passion throughout my whole life. I grew up with these movies in the 70s, and I grew up in Marin County. And this was like my temple. We went to the movies every Sunday night, and we used film as a way to talk about the meaning of life. And even Marin in the 70s is a notorious place where everyone got divorced in the 70s too. It was like the ice storm, like all over the place. And but the one consistent tradition in my life was going to the movies. So it was the steady way that we got to talk about meaning and purpose. But I never thought I could be a filmmaker because I was supposed to be a surgeon. My father was a surgeon, and I was the science kid. And so he bought me the book, The Making of a Woman Surgeon, 4 times growing up. And but I was super into technology. I also I was into science and technology. I got a Mac in 1984. Who got the Mac in 1984? Who remembers the Mac IIe? Anyone? And anyway, so those were the computers back then. I'd like to remind you all what life was like before the web. Take a moment. It's really hard to, I was telling my daughter about the encyclopedia. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I was like, we used to have this series of books, like 27 books, and I was inevitably always missing the letter that I needed to find, but everything was in there. And it's such a weird thing to try to explain to your teenage daughter that we had these books that had everything, and but I told her my parents were divorced. I was super into technology, and I got a modem. Now, this was before the web. This was in the 80s, the mid-80s, and I would connect my, do you guys remember the modems? I was like, and I would connect my modem to the library, and one of my best friends at the time was from Iran, an enemy country at the time. My family was from Odessa in the Ukraine, another enemy country in Russia. And we concocted world peace, that if we could get students all over the world to connect with their modems, with our Mac, we could all have dialogues and talk about what we have in common, and world peace would happen. So we wrote a proposal, 17 years old, is one-page proposal called Uniting Nations in Telecommunications and Software. One page, and the concept was connecting computers with modems to students all over the world. I sent it to Barbara Boxer, who was the congresswoman of Marin County at the time, and I said, I have this idea, and this is like I tell the story to my daughters, like, you have an idea, send it to someone that is elected. From that one-page proposal, I got invited to be a student ambassador in the Soviet Union when I was 18. So here I go to the Soviet Union, I'm like, oh my God, there's this thing called a personal computer. It's gonna change the world. And of course, they were in food lines in the Soviet Union. There was no talk about personal computers. And it was one of those first moments where I was like this privileged kid from Marin County and realized that, like, what was I talking about? This was like not here yet. But it was very, I was actually looking for, my family was from Odessa. A lot of them had died in the Holocaust. I was there on this kind of identity mission and also talking about the power of technology, but it was really way too early. So then I went to UC Berkeley and had one of those amazing professors, Marilyn Fabe, who had this, and I remember I was supposed to be a surgeon. Did you remember that part? And I had this film professor. I was taking all the sciences, which I loved, and anthropology and sociology. It was like a great liberal arts education at Cal. And my elective was film history. Had this great professor who had this infectious excitement about how film, changes in technology with the way we record culture, can change culture. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. I want to make movies. Can you imagine that conversation with my dad? He's like, I didn't pay you to go to Berkeley to watch Woody Allen movies. And I was like, he came around, but it was the first big, like, and he later got to see me succeed as a filmmaker, but it was definitely my big battle in college. But I was like, I'm going to be a film director. I want to make documentaries. I want to make films. And the way I'm going to pay for them is in technology. Because, you know, like, making films is not a lot of money when you're still starting out. So I would work. Does anyone remember the CD-ROM industry? That was the web before you could go anywhere. And so I got this job designing the Sting CD-ROM. Now, Sting was like the bomb back then. Remember, like, the early 90s, it was all about Sting. And I'm working on this CD-ROM in Seattle, and someone says to me, Tiffany, you have to see this thing called the web. There's this thing called a website, and people all over the world are talking about how much they love Sting's music. And I was like, that's that thing that I wrote about in high school. It's here, it's here. I couldn't get back to San Francisco quick enough. I told everyone about the web. No one even knew what it was. I'm like, the web is gonna change the world, this is so exciting. And no one knew what it was. People still had those like brick cell phones, do you remember? Like, just to get the era now that we're in. And I started the Webby Awards, which was to honor this very young medium at its nascent stage. And the Webbies was very exciting. We, I remember when Larry Page and Sergey Brin like rollerbladed onto the stage to get their first Webby Award when they had just started Google. We got to really honor the early pioneers, and every year we would kind of raise the bar on the standard, like, this is the best now go further, this is the best now go further. And it was an incredibly exciting time. I was working my tush off, I worked all the time. I just met my husband, who is a professor at Cal. I met him after I graduated. I always like to say that. Because it was only a year after I graduated. People were like, oh, you went to Cal and you're married to a Cal professor. And I'm like, no, not what you think. But I was doing all these big productions and doing the Webby Awards and trying to figure out how I was going to also have a career and have children. We all know that struggle. Doing the Webbies, and Bush got into office. And the first thing he did was the same thing that Trump did, was he took away funding for international family planning. And it was the first moment I was very pissed off. Like, people asked me, like, when did you become an activist? I was like, wow, well, that was the moment. because I had grown up hearing stories. My mom was a feminist and definitely marched for reproductive rights. My father was a doctor who would save women who gave abortions to themselves, and grew up on those stories. And then when Bush did that, I was like, oh my God. And I had been making all these short films for the Webbies. So the Webbies were usually in an opera house, 5,000 people, and I would do a short film about how technology was changing the way we live. And I went to Planned Parenthood and I said, you know, I have a full-time job, but I want to make a film for you that you can use for the 30-year anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And I want to make it short, and I want to make it funny, and I want to reach my generation of men and women, not just women. I want men to know it's their issue. And they were like, sure, go try to do that. You go do that. And so I made this 13-minute film called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And running the Webbies, thinking of how I could use the web, which, if you remember, there was a period where you couldn't show films on the web. It was just still text. So that's where we were. But I made this film, and it got into Sundance, which was like, you have to remember, that was my other dream, was being a filmmaker. And I had one of those light bulb moments, because here I had this short activist film, and the web could support the activism around the subject. And I also wanted to have children, and I was trying to think about how to work less and have more impact. So this film played at every Planned Parenthood gala for the 30-year anniversary. It's still to this day being shown. We updated it for the 40-year anniversary, because unfortunately it's gotten worse. But the fact that, you know, for the Webbies, I would have to do all this new energy every year, but my films exist without me. I've now made 32 films, and they just can exist, which is so exciting as a woman who wants to be with my kids, and I can suddenly do something that doesn't need me. They're like my children off in the world playing without me. So I was like, I need to sell the Webby Awards. I'm going to start a film studio that makes activist films using the web to make social change. So it was a really big moment for me. I sold the Webbies. I still have a bit of equity in it, but it runs completely without me, which is wonderful, and I started the Moxie Institute. One of the first films I made was called The Tribe. And remember how I told you my upbringing was all about films used for discussion? So I thought, I don't want to just make a movie. I want to make a discussion kit that lets you go deep on all the issues. So now when I raise funding for a movie, half of it's for the film, but half of it is for all the materials afterwards, because that's just as important to me. The film is to emotionally engage you and inspire you. But then I want to provide all the tools to take that next step that I never got to do when I was younger, but now with all these tools available, we could do. So I was really wrestling with my Jewish identity at the time, and most people don't know that Barbie was created by a Jew. So I thought that was the perfect way to explore America, because I'm a blonde, blue-eyed Jew named Tiffany. No one ever thinks I'm Jewish, so I always hear things I shouldn't. So it's a weird thing to like be something that at this point, most people know I'm Jewish because I've made a lot of films about it, but most of my 20s and early 30s, they didn't. So I made this film. I'll show you the trailer for The Tribe. A little louder, please.
Over 6 billion people live on the planet Earth. Thinking of them as a tribe of 100 people, there would be 60 Asians, 14 North and South Americans, 13 Africans, and 12 Europeans. 30 tribe members would be Christian, 18 would be Muslims, 13 Hindus, 6 Buddhists, and 33 would be other faiths, including, of the 100 tribe members, 1/4 of one would be Jewish. Within this circle, there was a woman named Ruth who created the Barbie doll. A Jewish woman created Barbie. Maybe Barbie can explain something about how this generation responds to being Jewish today. Since the old days, Jews refer to themselves as members of the tribe.
So that film goes into a lot. It looks like it's just about Barbie, and a lot of people would go see the movie thinking it was about Barbie, and it goes very deep. And what was exciting about it is I really thought it was just going to be used for people like me that were kind of asking questions about American Jewish identity. But it's just to give you the scope, it became the first documentary to be #1 on iTunes. It was bought by the US Navy for every one of their ships to talk about interfaith issues. And it's used at over 300 universities around the world. It is just was so exciting. That was that moment where my vision of film to activate discussions, we had these wonderful professors we kept it kept growing, and we kept finding new materials to go with it. So we have a whole university curriculum to go with it. And it's still, like as I said, being used all around. So it was really exciting for me to be able to manifest this idea of film plus discussion for social change. So then the next film that I wanted to make was looking at the history of technology and connectedness, and what is our desire to be looking at our phones all the time? I mean, I've been so glued to my phone all week, like, it's too much. It's too much with, it's not healthy. But what is all that about? So I was working on this film that looked from the Big Bang biologically, philosophically, politically. What does it mean to be connected in the 21st century? And in the middle of it, my father, who I was very close to, got sick. And then I realized that all of this connectedness, I had to explore the emotional connectedness. We all want to be loved. We all want to feel connected, and that our constant, it's just like we're trying to get those hits of feeling connected. So I ended up making a feature film called Connected, and I'll show you the trailer for that.
So I'm at lunch with this really good friend of mine, and we are having a fantastic time. I haven't seen her in years. We're laughing, drinking, talking, but I'm still getting this urge to check my email. And I was like, Tiffany, stay focused. You traveled all the way across the United States to see her. Stay focused. But eventually it was like, it overtook me. And then I faked needing to go to the bathroom. So I excused myself, grab my phone, go into the bathroom stall, kind of hiding, texting, emailing, thinking, what if I become? I can't be the only one sneaking to the bathroom to check my email. Technology is clearly changing us, and the way we connect with our friends, our families, and the world around us. So I set out to make a film about what it means to be connected in the 21st century. Things are changing. There's so much more to think about. And that pace of change is only accelerating. How much faster can it go before we can't keep up? This was the kind of question I was exploring in this film. And then I had this year that turned my world upside down. And forced me to rethink everything I thought I understood about the ways we're connected. We as humans have accumulated so much knowledge. Why do we have such a hard time seeing the bigger picture? For centuries, we've been declaring independence, and perhaps it's time to finally declare our interdependence.
So, like I told you, I'm just as into making all the materials around it. So we made a university curriculum around it and discussion materials, and it was a feature film. You know, it had theatrical release, which was an exhausting experience for me. That's an important point for later on. But taking a film into theaters, traveling to a different city, being away from my family, it was all exciting and exhausting, and a broken system in a lot of ways for independent films, as you probably know, because there's less and less independent movie houses around. But very exciting for me how many schools it was used in, and to this day, a way to talk about connectedness and what it means and where we came from and where we want to be headed. So at that point, the last line of the movie is, for centuries we've been declaring independence, perhaps it's time to declare our interdependence. And I was speaking at a conference like this, and this woman came up to me, a woman, A lot of my funders are very powerful women funders, which I love, which is a big change from the Webby Awards, which was all male funders in technology. And at this point in my career, it's all these powerful women, and I just love it. And she came up to me and said, I'm really interested in interdependence. I would like to give you an anonymous grant for you to explore a big idea. How often does that ever happen? Never, never. I looked at her, I was like, are you a unicorn? No, I didn't. I was like, okay, really? And she said, I don't want my name on anything, but I want you to come to me with a big idea. So I said to her, and after years of just scrounging for little grants and whatever, and I was like, okay, here's my big idea. My big idea is that when I made that film for Planned Parenthood, afterwards so many nonprofits came up to me and said, can you make me a film? And no, I couldn't. I didn't have the time. My idea was, could I make a white label movie? So many nonprofits are doing the important work of the world, but they're not filmmakers. What if I made a film that spoke to everyone and that they could make it a short, inspiring film, and they could put their logo and their call to action on it, and they could use it like it was their movie? And she's like, I like it. So the first movie we did, I thought, I want to rewrite the Declaration of Independence as a Declaration of Interdependence. So we wrote a one-page script. We posted it on the internet and on Facebook and Twitter, and an email said, anyone who this speaks to, just film yourself. And this was just the moment where, this was my favorite invention. I don't think it gets enough attention, but the moment that the cell phone had the button that you could film yourself, it's huge for me because, when you send a camera crew to film someone, everyone gets self-conscious. It's like there's people, and the ability to just press record and look at yourself, it's so raw and it's so powerful. So I asked people to film themselves speaking these words. And I don't have time. There's so many films I want to show you, but I can't show you them all. But I recommend, it's called The Declaration of Interdependence. It's 4 minutes. Moby did the music from my dear friend Julie, and producer and co-writer on many things. It's a very powerful film. It was used by 1,000 nonprofits. It was translated into 69 languages. And I was like, that model is so exciting to me. So I later, we did a whole film series. This is what this incredible woman funded. And we started a nonprofit. So I had the Moxie Institute. We started a nonprofit called Let It Ripple, because the goal is to give these films away for free and that anyone can own it afterwards. So we made another film called Brain Power that looked at early childhood brain development from 0 to 5 years, the neuroscience behind that. Ironically, I didn't become a brain surgeon, but a lot of my films are about neuroscience. Super interested in that subject. And did a book based on that. And then the State Department started sending me with these films with Connected and with these Let It Ripple film series around the world, which was so great because then more people got to use the movies. And then I started a film series called The Future Starts Here. And it was an original series. And as much as I've told you all about how much I love technology and the potential of it, I'm also profoundly worried about how much we are online. And so I'm going to show you one episode from that series called Technology Shabbats. A little louder, please.
I love technology. Like everyone, I'm totally addicted. But it's also consumed all of my time, where I feel like I'm constantly responding to everyone and not really responding to myself in some ways.
But a few years ago, I started thinking a lot about time. My father was dying of brain cancer, and sometimes he only had 1 good hour a day. So it made me think about how little of time we have. And during that time, my family and I decided to completely unplug from technology 1 day a week. We call it our Technology Shabbats. We've done it every week for more than 3 years.
And it's completely changed my life. I'm Tiffany Schlane. I'm a mother, filmmaker. I founded the Webby Awards. And this series is about how the future doesn't start somewhere far off in the distance. The future starts here. Let me start by saying that I'm Jewish. Oy! No, but I'm not religious. But I love the rituals. I'm culturally Jewish. And there's this organization I'm a part of called Reboot that was doing a national day of unplugging several years ago. And my family and I did it, and it was such a profound experience that we've done it every week since. It's like our modern version of a very old Jewish tradition of taking 1 day off a week called Shabbat. We still drive cars and use electricity, but for us, no screens. No TV, no cell phone, or anything that pulls us away from being together. It's our interpretation of the essence of Shabbat, being present.
And the idea of taking a day off has happened all over the world in all these different cultures.
To take breaks, pray, do rituals, or to experience time in a different way. In the Jewish tradition, it's from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, what one of my favorite Jewish philosophers, Heschel, calls a palace in time. For Muslims, the sacred day is Friday. For most Christians, it's Sunday. And for the never-distracted Buddha, you could just say that being enlightened, he was having Shabbat all the time. But with all these new delicious technologies today, when do we ever get the space to take time off?
I mean, doesn't it feel like you're always being distracted or beeped at or tweeted or... I mean, I just feel like I'm influenced by so many different things. I feel like I'm in an emotional pinball machine.
It just seems like a good idea to have one day where no one gets to affect your mood except yourself and the people that you love right around you. Now, taking this one day off from technology every week, I feel so much more grounded and balanced. My husband Ken and I try to be as unavailable as possible, except to each other and our children. I feel like a better mother, wife, and person. Every week, it's like a valve of pressure releases from the bombardment of interesting facts, articles, and tidbits I consume daily as I travel on this info rocket of discovery, procrastination, productivity, and then eventually overload. Now, there's so much good that comes from technology. Just know that I believe that. But I also think about what it's taking away. Being present, being focused in the moment.
No radio, TV, even the wire services are cut. It's like the town's hanging in midair.
Researchers have compared the sense of technological dependency on the feeling that we must be accessible and responsive at any time to that of drugs and alcohol. And it's all because of this hormone dopamine, which is related to mood, attention, and desire, whether it's for knowledge, food, or sex. And it tells you that when you get something and it feels good, you want more of it.
So when you're up late licking, when you're up late, hopefully not licking.
I mean, clicking from website to website or compulsively texting or emailing, those are dopamine-induced loops. And just as we've discovered the hard way, when we have too much sugar or too much alcohol, you can have too much information. I believe we're only at the beginning of truly understanding the effects of too much technological stimulation on the brain.
Smooth as a baby's bottom.
The memory has been removed, like chalk erased from a blackboard.
So as we rush into this era of hyper-connected human evolution, we need to evolve and adapt to be more mindful of what we're doing online and when we should go off. Since we've unplugged on Saturdays, our Saturdays now feel like mini vacations, slow living that we savor like fine wine. We garden, we take bike rides, we do art projects. We're just present with the people right in front of us. And it's such a beautiful day. It's my favorite day of the week. Now, there's one other benefit to unplugging each week. By sundown on Saturday night, we can't wait to go back online. We appreciate technology all over again. But more importantly, the one day off to rest and think about the world makes me reinvigorated to engage in the world with a new perspective. So every week, we remember that the most important thing about technology is it has an off switch.
So do you want to try it with us this weekend?
Think about it. You can do all those things you've been putting off. Garden, call your mom, look out the window, read a book. Unplug.
So I have to tell you that we've now been doing it for 8 years. And it is I cannot wait for tonight. I have been feeling so emotionally spent from the fires and the news that I race towards Friday nights. And a lot of people say to me, "What? Do you have a teenager?" And now I get to say, "Yeah, I do." She's done it so long that she looks forward to it. And they look forward to, so my husband and I go out on our date night on Saturday night, and they have their technology date night. Because they can't wait to go. They're like, okay, bye, bye. They can't wait to get us out the door, and then they're like on all their devices and everything. Although I do have the only child. She has now told me, Mom, I'm the only kid in high school without a smartphone. She's 14. So it's something that she has a dumb phone. She has a flip phone. I hate it that they call that a dumb phone. I think that's what's keeping her really grounded, but I'm definitely on the edge. I'm feeling like, she said that her teachers will say, pull out your phones for assignments, which I have issues with. But anyways, but this experiment, which it is an experiment because I didn't need any studies, although there are going to be studies that are going to come out on how much it's changing the brain, especially developing children's brains. But I didn't need any of those studies. I knew when my father died that we were losing our ability to be present and to honor him. He was one of those people that at his funeral, everyone used to say, your dad always made me feel like the most important person in the room. And I feel like the moment that my dad died, the iPhone came out, and no one is the most important person in the room anymore. You're talking to someone, you're having, and then they get a buzz and they just turn away from you. They take a call. Like, what is that? I mean, I'm so glad none of you are texting, but you know, in classes, I mean, I don't know, we're just losing something. And every day, one day a week, every week, I get to remember what we're losing and what we need to create, whatever people call it, space for not being online. And so the experiment keeps getting richer and richer for me because we've been doing it for so long, but I highly recommend it, even if it's just when you get home from work and you just put it away, all of that. So back to filmmaking. So those films that I was telling you about, I call them cloud films because we ask a lot of people to send us videos on their cell phones recording themselves. And after having a conversation at dinner last night, I just went to an amazing symposium at Berkeley about the free speech movement. Because as we all know, Berkeley has become a circus for I'm sure I'm not supposed to get political here, but it's been very disturbing how much I feel like the notion of free speech is being warped, and I'm sure all of you at universities are dealing with the subject. It was a great symposium at Cal. Robert Reich gave a great, great talk. I highly recommend it. If you can, it's all recorded. But about 3 years ago, it was the 50-year anniversary of the free speech movement, and so UC Berkeley asked me to make one of my cloud films for free speech. So this is a 2-minute film. I know we're thinking about free speech in such different ways after Charlottesville and all this stuff, but it's really good. I wanted to show it because it's just to remember what free speech is about and what we're fighting for. So that's a 2-minute cloud film.
But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly.
The freedom of assembly.
Freedom of assembly.
Freedom of assembly.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
The freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
And the time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart.
Makes you so sick at heart.
Makes you so sick at heart.
Te enferma el corazón. That you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Can't even passively take part.
And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus.
Upon the levers.
All the apparatus.
Then you've got to make it stop.
Make it stop.
Make it stop. Make it stop.
And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free,
Unless you're free.
Unless you were free. Free.
the machine will be prevented from working at all.
say the film takes on so much different meaning for me. Just even thinking about the NFL protest. I mean, just this issue is so important. And there was something that was said. I mean, one of the most frustrating parts, at least at UC Berkeley, was when Schmuck spoke, Milo. It cost the school $800,000. $800,000. And I was just like, oh my God, don't let them all know that, because that's going to cost our schools so much money. But yet we need to let them speak. We need people to hear them speak, but not at the expense of all the other voices. I mean, it's just gotten so complicated, and to me, it's such a pure issue. Anyways, I'm sure you guys are all dealing with this at your campuses. So with these cloud films, so now at this point, I've made 6 cloud films where I write a script. We invite people around the world to record it, which is very powerful. It doesn't have like a rawness to them, just filming themselves. And then we thought, well, what if we did a cloud film premiere? Remember how I told you how stressful doing a theatrical release was? What if I could just let everyone else premiere it at their own schools and companies or whatever? So I was handed research about Marty Seligman and the positive psychology movement. I was very excited. How many of you know about the positive psychology movement? It's basically talks all about how for years in psychology it was what was wrong with you, what you needed to fix, and Marty Seligman and Peterson were these 2 psychologists who studied cultures around the world and said there are common character strengths and virtues that all cultures value, and what if we focus on what is positive in us and build upon that? So I made this film called The Science of Character, again, a cloud film. I'm not going to show it to you, but I highly recommend it. It's an 8-minute film. And it explains this philosophy and a lot of new ideas about building character. I mean, we've all heard the terms grit and resilience, and it kind of goes into that, but in an 8-minute, very accessible way. And I thought, well, let's premiere it in a new way. Let's call it Character Day. Let's give everyone the film for free. Let's have discussion materials and let them do their own event. So this is the trailer for Character Day. It's just a 1-minute trailer. So we just had our 4th annual Character Day last month. There was 133,000 events in all 50 states, in 125 countries, I hope you all will bring Character Day. It's very exciting. We then unify all the screenings with a global Q&A, and for sure right now we need to be talking about character. What does it mean to develop your character? What does it mean to be a good person? All of these issues around justice and all of the stuff that matters to us is all about character. We don't talk about it enough. So that was very exciting, and I made a Jewish version called The Making of a Mensch of the film that is also shown for Character Day. We've now made 4 films that are shown on Character Day. And we have this resource hub that lets you search for materials by strength. We've really just been expanding what we could do. So the next project that I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but this is a longer film, so prepare yourselves. You're the perfect audience for this, and your wonderful intro, like every line both of you said was like just seeding this film. This film is all about what is it going to take to get to 50-50. And I'm not going to say too much more. It's 20 minutes, and then I'll tell you what we did with this film. So lights down, please, and enjoy.
I recently learned this
Louder?
fact that completely blew my mind. I'm at this event and I meet a woman named Laura Liswood, and we're talking. I'm like, what do you do? And she said, I convene elected women presidents and prime ministers for the United Nations. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing thing to do. How long have you been doing that? She said, oh, around 20 years. I was like, how many had there been 20 years ago? And she said 15. So I was like, well, how many are there today? And she said, oh, around 50. And I was like, 50? How did I not know that? That there had been around 50 elected women presidents and prime ministers. And then it made me think, gosh, maybe we've been just telling the story of scarcity for so long, and maybe it's time we told a new story of abundance. I woke up the next morning and I couldn't wait to tell Ken and our daughters about how many women had been elected heads of state. And then I proceeded to ask everyone around me who I thought might know the number, and nobody even came close to half. I asked friends, I asked CEOs of big companies, feminists, people on the street.
How many elected women presidents and prime ministers in the whole world do you think there have been? Elected, no royalty.
2 or 3.
Not many.
5, 6, 10.
I would say under 5.
I don't know. So the answer is 50.
50, really?
50.
Oh, wow.
50.
But not enough.
But not enough. Yeah. I mean, I've always thought of myself as a feminist. My great-grandmother marched, my mother marched, I've marched. Even when I was growing up, my mom was writing her PhD thesis on the importance of mentors and mothers on successful women. And my dad wrote books about women in power. So I was completely disappointed in myself for not knowing. And it made me think, what else don't I know? And this all set me down a road to piece together a new narrative that looks at where are we really on the greater arc of history of women in power? And what's it gonna take to get to a 50-50 world? And I'm not talking just politics and boardrooms. I am talking across all parts of society, truly shifting the gender balance to be better for everyone. So in order to think about where we are on this arc and how we're gonna get to where we wanna go, let's go back to the very beginning. It turns out the oldest hominid ever discovered is a female hominid. Not a feminist, but a feminid. Okay, we actually know very little about who wore the pants back then. Not that pants even existed. But fast forward to the Neolithic age, things were pretty egalitarian. Women and men had equal social status, and the earliest written laws reflected these egalitarian societies. Women could choose to marry and divorce. Women were healers, shamans, religious leaders, warriors, and lawmakers. All genders were respected. We're talking over 10,000 years ago this was happening. And then, like many times on our journey, the story takes a dark turn. The balance shifted. My father attributed this shift to literacy rewiring our brains. Others point to the rise of agriculture, which favored physical strength, the conquest of land. We started seeing the development of military, political power. Even art became more dude-centric. Goddesses became gods, and the voices of women were silenced. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest laws stated, if a woman speaks to a man out of turn, her teeth will be smashed in by a burnt brick. Patriarchy had arrived and was literally chiseled in stone. But we know that our history has been written mostly by men. I want the rest of the story. How are we supposed to know where we are in the arc of history if we don't have the full context? And not just elected leaders, but the centuries of badass women that I know were there, paving the paths and contributing to where we are today. Let's go find them. Here we have Hatshepsut in ancient Egypt, one of the first great women leaders. Egypt thrived under her long and influential reign for 22 years. But the next pharaoh literally chiseled her face out of history. And here's Boudica, the woman warrior who led the Britons in a revolt against the Romans.
And Wu Zetian, the first and only female ruler of China, who also had her story altered by the men who followed. There was Margaret I of Denmark, who united the Scandinavian nations. I had never seen all these women linked together. Like warrior queen Amina, who ruled what is now Nigeria. And Queen Elizabeth I, at the time the most powerful person in the world, ruled for nearly 50 years. While she was in power, an explorer brought her what he thought was the horn from a unicorn. She liked it so much she added it to the crown jewels. We could actually call her a unicorn. We could call all of these women unicorns. Not mythical or unreal, but women who stood out, unique to their day, courageous women navigating uncharted terrain. And as I learned more about these women, I kept thinking about my mom's thesis that looked at successful women and the importance of their female mentors. So Mom, how would you define a mentor?
Someone who helps somebody else find their own path. One question you haven't asked me, which is important, is why did I study mentors? I never had a mentor. And then I thought, I wonder what it's like if someone had a mentor. All the studies, and I had to read all the studies about men first, having a mentor made the difference in the final push toward success.
I mean, how did my mom accomplish so much without a mentor? And how did these women centuries ago accomplish so much? Did they have mentors? How did it even work back then? There was no easy way to connect with other women leaders. Hello. And no narrative over time to link their stories together. But eventually that narrative did begin, like with Christine de Pizan in France in the 1300s. 500 years before the word feminism was even coined, she is considered the first writer to examine the roles of women throughout history and to weave together their experiences, creating a narrative not just of political leaders, but of women in all different ways we contribute to society. And over the centuries, countless women would build on that narrative as artists, storytellers, philosophers, mothers, and leaders. But the mountains of imbalance were also centuries high, and for every one climbed, there was another to struggle with. Room for fewer and fewer at the top, with more struggling to climb, more hurdles, more pushback. Like it was around this time that many of the wise, independent, and rebellious women of their day were labeled witches and put on trial. An estimated 50,000 women in Europe and the US were burned and executed. That's a lot of powerful women to lose from our narrative. And the imbalance was also becoming more and more embedded in political structures. Even our own country, which I do love, was established with the line, "All men are created equal." And this was a time of slavery. Clearly they didn't mean all men. And clearly they didn't mean women. Women couldn't own property. We had the same legal status as children. We couldn't vote. But no mountain was going to truly hold our power back. Women were rising in art, science, and culture. And pioneers were gathering, coming together to fight for more rights. Momentum was building in Europe, the US, and dots around the globe into what we now call the first wave of feminism. In 1848, 300 women and a few men convened in Seneca Falls, New York, and declared, "All men and women are created equal." The whole suffragist fight was gruesome, but the battle was worth it. 70 years after Seneca Falls, women in the US won the right to vote. But I found this part so haunting. Only one of the women who attended Seneca Falls was still alive. Charlotte Woodward was 92 and she didn't make it to the polls. She got sick on election day. And this story was such a reminder for me on how long real social change takes, and that we can't take any of these hard-fought rights for granted. And if we want to be alive to experience a more equal world, we have to accelerate the pace of change. And I do think that's happening. I mean, if we look at the whole arc of history, a lot has happened in the last 100 years. Even just in my lifetime. I was born in 1970, the heart of the women's movement.
I am a woman, hear me roar.
It was an amazing surge of momentum. The second wave of feminism, which, like all change, had all kinds of challenges.
The national chairman of the movement to stop the so-called Equal Rights Amendment is Mrs. Phyllis Schlafly.
That Equal Rights Amendment, by the way, the ERA, was first introduced in Congress in 1923, was brought back in the 70s and every year after, and it still hasn't passed 100 years later. But what I didn't fully grasp about the momentum in the 70s is that while all the strides and struggles were happening in the US, women gathering, creating support groups, fighting for more rights, there was also a lot of exciting things happening on an international scale. By 1970, 3 countries had elected women as heads of state. And in 1975, the UN brought together the first International Women's Conference. Over 6,000 delegates from 133 countries traveled to Mexico City and gathered in person for 2 weeks to discuss the status of equal rights on a global scale. They made a collective plan. They'd convene again in Copenhagen in 1980.
Above all, we have learned that to achieve full justice and equality for women will require a long and patient struggle.
And they'd meet again in Nairobi in 1985 and Beijing in 95.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
It's like all these decades of global gatherings were all the first and onlys, the unicorns from all over the world coming together to build networks of support. Kind of perfect that a herd of unicorns is called a blessing. It was also in the mid-90s that Laura Liswitz started the Council of Women Leaders.
I was noticing some very common themes running through about power, about how women are treated. I started asking them if they wanted to meet. They said they did, and so that's how the council started.
And picture, this was the 70s, 80s, and 90s. All the connecting was done with faxes, letters, and plane rides just to have conversations. It's a whole different world today. The internet is accelerating the pace of change in so many ways. We can connect across continents and write and share stories that aren't already there, which brings power and opportunity to far more voices. But along with that comes greater responsibility.
Our work is not done. Violence against women is global and systematic. Inequality is still present throughout every facet of our lives.
In addition to that transparency and responsibility, today's world also gives us more ways to learn from each other, person to person and country to country.
I understand one of the priorities for you was to have a cabinet that was gender balanced. Why was that so important to you?
Because it's 2015.
There are over 300 studies showing that making those changes from all levels, business, politics, and culture, makes life better for everyone, not just women, everyone. Over half of the countries that rank highest in gender equality across different sectors also rank highest on the Global Happiness Index. A lot of these countries pay for early child care and high-quality education. They have national parental leave for both men and women. So instead of this idea of stay-at-home mom, they're supporting parents, period. Because dads are being deprived of their power too. The power of nurturing and raising the next generation. A recent study in the US showed that 50% of men who are offered paid paternity leave feel they can't take it. Men have an entire history of stereotypes and expectations to wrestle with too. And those men who are equal parents, I feel like they're the next chapter of first and onlys that are paving the path to something better.
50-50 isn't just about women getting more power. It's about everyone getting more power. It's about opening up the whole idea of what power is. Moving beyond the binaries of men and women. We're all on a continuum with different combinations of strengths to bring to the table. Power is leadership, but power is also love. Power is empathy. Power is the opportunity to find your own path. So how do we really get there to the world we want to see? I turned to the person who blew my mind and set me down this path in the first place. So Laura, how do we get to 50-50?
Well, I think change itself goes from the unthinkable to the impossible to the inevitable. But someone has to move it along. I often like it to a standing ovation. A few people jump up and say this is the best thing that they have ever seen. Then another larger group gets up and says, yes, this was just excellent. Then the large group gets up and says, yeah, this was okay. And then finally the last group gets up because they can't see the stage.
So where are we on that arc of history?
I think the generations that are alive today have the potential to reach that standing ovation.
Although, as we know, change can be very disruptive and very unsettling for people. And often there's some group of people who want to revert to a good old days kind of thing.
But the rest of us, we need to stand up and keep clapping. In the middle of this journey, our daughter Odessa was getting bat mitzvahed. And Ken and I talked so much about what we were each going to say to her at this big rite of passage.
My favorite saying in the Talmud is, when you teach your children, you teach your children's children.
A mentor is someone who helps somebody else find their own path.
These are all the people who are going to be there for the rest of your life supporting you. Each of these people has a whole room of people that supported them to allow them to be in this room supporting you.
Piecing together this history and putting it into context made me see mentorship in a whole new way. Mentors are all around us, younger, older, peer-to-peer, country-to-country, and from all of history. And we need to keep them all right here, right next to us. I used to think I had the full context of women in power, but I was still letting the story of scarcity guide me. And then I realized that if we really build on the centuries of momentum, generations of courageous women that have brought us this far, we can take this story of scarcity and turn it into a story of abundance.
When you get to the top of the mountain, pull the next one up. Then there'll be two of you, tired and proud. And when the second one has finished taking in the view, let her pull the next one up. Room enough for all on the mountain peaks. To pull the next woman up. Pull the next man up. Pull the next up. 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 Up.
I have to give a shout out to, oh, thank you. I have to also thank one of my best friends and co-writers and producers, Julie Hermelin, who's in the audience with us. Thank you, Julie. I think of this gathering when I was thinking of the gathering in the movie where they got you guys are all the university people, leaders together. So this film premiered on Refinery 29 and at TED Women 2 weeks before the election. And it got a standing ovation like this with like 800 women, so pumped for the first woman president. And we had a plan the next morning after the election to edit in Hillary. That was the plan. And we woke up after the election devastated and crying and mad and angry and all the emotions that I'm sure a lot of us felt, and went to the film studio and thought, we're going to do a 50-50 day based on Character Day about what is it going to take to get to 50-50. So this was that we decided to do that the day after the election. We announced it at the Women's March in D.C. Was anyone in D.C.? No, it was it was, I'm sure you were in your own cities or whatever, but we announced it there. And we made a trailer, which I'm not going to show you because there's not enough time and I want to get to Q&A with you as well. But, well, actually, I am going to show it to you.
Join us for 50-50 Day May.
A little louder, please.
Where thousands of events around the globe will have film screenings and discussions, and they'll all be linked together by a global Q&A, all talking about how to get to a more gender-balanced world.
So this is from part of the movie. So basically, we brought on all these really cool sponsors, and a lot of corporations, and a lot of tech companies, and, you know, one interesting, it's interesting. It was different than Character Day because, like, it's such a hot topic and everyone is so fired up about it, which is great. Let's seize that momentum. So, in its first year, the first year of Character Day, we had 1,500 events. The first year of 50-50 Day, we had 11,000, just to show you kind of the scale. And this is a short highlights video of what happened on 50-50 Day. This is the day I want you to bring to your universities and colleges and campuses. It was so powerful. Here's what it looked like. A little louder. It's like good volume.
Welcome to 50-50 Day. This is the crew. Kind of behind the scenes here.
This is 50-50 Day.
Welcome to 50-50 Day in Minneapolis.
Good evening and welcome to the National Museum of Women in the Arts.
Four, three,
and we're on. This is Tiffany Schlain here for 50-50 Day.
Welcome to 50-50 Day.
Hashtag getting to 50-50.
I have the incredible honor of interviewing
so many interviews that have been happening. And right now, we have Dolores Huerta. She is a legend.
We have seen this resurgence of women saying, hey, I can do it, and I need to do it, and I'm going to get out there and make it happen.
There were several dozen countries who had women on the modern day currency, and I couldn't really understand why we weren't one of them. So I asked, they all had the same answer. No one's ever brought it up.
Everyone should own this as leaders and say, this is where we should go.
I think what you guys have started is truly a movement, opposed to all of us doing our own projects in these silos. There's so much we can do together, and you guys are connecting those dots.
There's a lot of ways of bringing about gender equity. The one that I've employed is storytelling.
We have to be willing to talk about money, and we have to be willing to be intentional, not only in how we give our dollars, but how we invest them and how we use it around our purchasing power.
We must mobilize and support and mentor
the younger ones.
Take all the perspectives that we have in our LGBTQ community and take our culture and inject it into an industry that needs it so much.
The more women you see in leadership roles, the more opportunities you create.
We've committed 100% to the notion of 50-50. We innovate more, we create things better and more happily.
We need to double down and do that 100 times over.
A key challenge for most countries remains the gender pay gap.
It's now socially unacceptable to be in a room without women unless you're serving in government.
That's 50,000 interviews from 30 countries. Guys who buy into a more equitable version of manhood are happier and healthier.
While we work for that change and not sit around and ask for permission.
So this is the poster. Remember I said everyone gets free, and we get funding so we can give this all away for free, so you don't need to get approval on budget or anything. We want to remove any friction. This is the poster. These are all of the pillars. There's so many areas that need to be worked on this issue, as we all know. So now we have 50 days. So we moved it up. Last year it was May 10th. It was during finals at a lot of universities. And we moved it up so all of you could get, I had so many university presidents, professors saying, it's the middle of finals, I can't do it in the middle of finals. So we moved it up for you all. So, so it is April. I know some spring breaks. If you have spring break, then you can do it a week before or after that, because spring break is like all over the map those 2 months. And so these global days are so exciting because we're all talking about these issues, but to do something all on the same day, it's this ineffable thing of doing something with people all over the world from all their different perspectives. And what makes us unique is, you know, everyone says they want gender equity in different ways in different parts of the world, but what we're doing is we're saying, we don't want you to go to a conference or a theater, we want you to bring the change where it needs to happen. And an interesting thing, a lot of women from tech companies were like the women at Facebook or the women, like, oh, I'm gonna bring this to my women's group. And we were like, no, we don't want you to bring it to the women's group. We want you to bring it to the company. We don't want it to just be in women's studies. We want it to bring it to the school. Have it as a campus-wide event, and it'll be, that's how we move the needle. This film, you show the film, that's like the centerpiece. We have all these materials. We had so many men look at this script. Men love this movie because it speaks to men, it's not threatening. We had men look through our script, including my husband. He's like, oh, that's gonna threaten men. That's gonna piss them off. Took them out. We need men to want this. It's not women's 50-50 day, it's 50-50 day. And that's a really big message. So the centerpiece is the film. We have all these aspects that can bring this out further into all of those pillars you saw on the poster. And we have a lot of exciting, even more this year coming on board for it. These are all the different components. You have the film. We have big public events at universities and museums, and then there's a lot of private events at companies. Oopsie. But just to show you the growth comparative character day to 50-50 day, the growth is so exponential because this issue is so hot. Let's seize this moment in history right now. There's a lot of frustration with a lot of women, and I think we're all realizing what it's like to have male leadership at the highest level, what's happening. And so we want to turn the story of scarcity into a story of abundance. The way we're gonna do that is everyone pull out your phones right now and go to 50-50day.org. And here's the thing, when you sign up, let me know when you're on that screen because it might take a couple seconds. The key thing is that you're not just bringing, we know that every one of your departments at your university has a different aspect they need to move the needle on, and they're different, they really are different. So what a lot of schools do is they'll sign up every department. That's what we'd like. Be that champion, be that ambassador. It's very fun to bring because you're bringing like this exciting day that's free to your campus. So did that page come up on the 50 days? So then you're gonna scroll down and you're gonna get to a screen that says sign up for 50-50 Day 2018. Let me know when you're there. I did this the other day at the Mill Valley Film Festival and I went too fast and no one got to sign up. So you were like my dream room. Like I moved the date for you all. So like, let's make it happen. So tell me when you're on that screen. Let's see the little button, the blue button. And then there's gonna be a series of screens. This first one, you can just scroll down, this one down here. And of course, the ones, some of them are not mandatory. But I'm just going to let you all do this for a second while I sit by the fire. I should have sign-up music for this part. Do, 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 do. Is it? Is slow like the process? See, I just worry if we don't take this moment. Okay, but it's good to know that it's slow. That might be the Wi-Fi because you guys are all on it at once. But I promise you, because what will happen if we don't take this moment is some of you will remember and some of you won't. And I'll be so sad for the people that aren't with us. And again, you can skip some screens. This is how change happens. And the first person that's done, tell me, so then I'll know. You finished? Awesome. Okay, we're almost there, you guys. You women. I don't want to see you guys anymore. You good? Raise your hand if you're done. Okay, wait one more minute. Okay, I'll let those of you that are finishing up keep finishing up, and I'll tell those of you that are done that I'm working on a new film that will premiere for 50/50 Day about the importance of a reflective democracy. That we need to have a democracy that looks like our population. It's going to be a short cloud film, and we're going to offer it to free to any woman that's running, any organization that's supporting women running. And the whole goal is that we are going to use the film to help people so we have a more reflective democracy and nonpartisan, because we're a 501c3. And those of you that are still a little bit on your phones, I love that. I so want you to finish, so I'm just like going to be. These are other ways you can stay in touch with me. I have a quarterly newsletter called Breakfast at Tiffany's that I've been doing for 20 years about projects we're working on, books, films, events I think you should know about. How many of you are done now? Almost there. Okay. And my vision really is that what would it look like one day if we had an event where everybody was participating? That's the big vision. And what's so exciting about this model is it's so scalable. It could really be infinite. And as much as I believe in the power of connecting all of us through film and materials, I also believe in the power of disconnection. And that hopefully we'll rise up as humans and know that we should not be staring at these screens all the time, because it's really unhealthy. And I think we all know when we get away from the screens how much better we feel. So those are my two dueling messages. They're just as important, and they're like my life's work at this point. I just premiered a new film, which I don't have time to show you, but it's an 11-minute film that premiered on Character Day called 30,000 Days. 30,000 days are the amount of days you have if you live the average life expectancy of 82 years. And the film looks at the history of asking questions of meaning and purpose. So we start with the Greek philosophers, we go through every religion to atheists, the Enlightenment. We talk about what does it mean to lead a life of meaning and purpose. And it's a really powerful film for right now. And it's 11 minutes long, and that premiered on Character Day. And I don't have time. I was going to show you a clip, but I don't think we have time. Because would you guys rather get to a Q&A, or do you want to see a 4-minute clip? You want to see the 4-minute clip? Okay. Cool. I'm cool. I love showing. I mean, it's like, you know, for each talk, it's like a different combination of films, but I do want to show. This is a 4-minute excerpt of the 11-minute film. It's only 11 minutes, but I certainly don't have time to show that. But this is a 4-minute excerpt of 30,000 Days.
So let's hope for the high end, 82 years. Start with a little optimism. And then if you multiply that by 365, that's around 30,000 days. 30,000 days. That's the amount of days that you hopefully have here on this earth.
30,000 days.
30,000 days.
30,000 días.
30,000 days.
30,000 יום.
30,000 days.
30 jours.
There are a lot of ways you could spend those days. What do you want to contribute to the world? What do you want to do that you haven't done? What gives your life purpose? So how are you going to spend your days? What's the world asking of you in your 30,000 days? So let's try something. Think of your unique special sauce, the things that make you, you, the qualities that you value. And then think about what gets you most excited, passionate. What's that thing or that issue that you care so much about? And then think, how can I bring my personal strengths to the thing I'm most passionate about, to the change I want to see in the world? That's purpose.
I get a sense of purpose from feeling like the work that I do contributes to advancing society, advancing women.
Family. The purpose of me being a farmer, that way the people know what they're getting.
It's kind of a lifelong journey to figure that out.
Asking questions.
Or growing other people.
Be able to mean something in someone else's life.
The arts, loving my fiance.
Not only share my truth, but then to liberate and maybe facilitate someone sharing their own truth.
What I want to contribute to the world is a school that inspires and prepares change makers.
And finding that purpose, regardless of when in life you find it, can have extraordinary benefits. Scientific research shows that feeling a sense of purpose reduces stress, depression, dementia, substance abuse, and even can lead to a longer and happier life. And the key to all of this goes back to ideas humans have been talking about for nearly 3,000 years. Focusing on and cultivating character, a sense of who you are and what you value. Because things are going to come at you in life from all directions, good and bad, that might shift what brings you that sense of purpose. But your character strengths are at the core. They're your resources to call upon to help navigate a future that's unknown. While it may seem like we're facing more complex problems today than we have in the past, if we look back through history, we can see these times as an invitation to step up and focus on what really matters. So how are you going to spend your 30,000 days?
I think that's a good place to do Q&A. So thank you. So do you have any questions you'd like to ask? I don't know if there's a mic going around. Or.
Hi, everyone. Let's give it up one last time for Tiffany Schlane.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. We have time for about 2 questions today, so
Okay.
please.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was great. I was wondering about the 50-50 day and how it applies to college campuses.
Okay.
And we don't have so much of a problem of getting 50% of our undergraduate population to be male and female, but we do have a problem with the distribution of male and female across schools on campus. So especially the STEM fields are way underbalanced. Arts might be the other way, humanities. So is there a way that we can tweak or incorporate that concern into the 50-50
I love
day?
that. I think that's a great focus. I mean, you know, it's interesting because different schools might have different, that's what's so exciting to us because, like I said, for Character Day, tons of universities are involved, but 50-50 Day, it's such a fascinating topic because, I mean, you know, I certainly know with tenured professors, I mean, there's kind of issues there, female tenured professors versus male tenured professors. But yeah, in terms of who's going into sciences and technologies versus the arts, that's a great topic. I mean, what's exciting to us is to work with a lot, you know, you can do whatever you want. We basically are giving you all the tools to have a great discussion for your environment. So I love that you're saying that. So maybe that's part of your discussion. And, you know, how can we equal that playing field? I mean, I know in a lot of technology companies, which was kind of my background, there was a great article that just came out and from a woman on why she was an engineer and why she didn't want to join the tech companies. It was not a welcoming environment. There wasn't mentorship programs, all the reasons that you can imagine. So looking at what are the issues and breaking that down, I think is a great subject. I mean, what would be really exciting is if each of you, you know, if at your different schools presented this and said, you know, each of you are going to come at this from a different perspective. And let's have one day where the whole school is talking about this subject and we're joined to this big global event and we're going to department by department or cross-disciplinary issues come up. I mean, that's so exciting. That's how change happens. So thank you for bringing that up. I got one more question. Any other one question? Yeah?
So I'm not sure how to ask this. So I work in Associated Students here at Cal State San Marcos, and we talk about students that aren't on the gender binary, right?
Yep.
So wondering if you've probably had discussions about that and how you've gone about talking about that on 50-50 Day, because I'm in programming, sounds like a great program, but kind of thinking ahead of time of how will we have those conversations with students.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought that up. We have, you know, actually our new tagline on our poster will be, you know, we say all genders, all ages, but we're going to even make that a little bit more clear on the tagline, and we're going to add the word intersecting. We have it visually in the poster, like they're all intersecting, but to get the concept of intersectionality involved as well, more highlighted. But when we say 50-50, what we mean is equality, wherever you fall. And we actually, there's a line in the film, it says, wherever everyone's on a continuum is the line in the movie, which we all are. And so we're very welcoming to non-binary. We don't want 50-50 like you're either a man or a woman. It's more like equality. We need equal representation, equal value in society. And last year we had non-binary speakers, and our other producer is trans, man, so we go all those places. So it's very much part of the discussion. I mean, we're living in a really exciting time where my niece right now is becoming a nephew as we speak. And he's posting it on Instagram, and those conversations weren't even happening 10 years ago. So what an exciting time to just like open up this whole conversation. And what we're really talking about is equal value in voice in society. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to be around at the break if you didn't get to ask a question, if you want to talk, and if you want to talk to me and Julie. And again, this is how change happens, is all of you in this room bringing this to your school, making it a, an important conversation to have. So thank you.
And you've already met our first distinguished panelist, President Haynes. So President Haynes, please join up here. You're in the second seat, right. Okay, and also joining the panel today is President Joylyn Blake and President Gail Hutchinson. So please welcome them. So very briefly, Dr. Blake is the 10th Superintendent President of the Palomar Community College District from Palomar College. She has served this role for more than a year now and is focused on building enrollment, relationships, grant funding, and the like. And actually, she's going to be leaving us here today to scurry up north to right off where the 76 and the 15 are meet to oversee a groundbreaking of their northern offsite campus. Dr. Blake's, yeah, right, great. Dr. Blake's previous administrative and leadership positions include president at College of Alameda in the Peralta Community College District, vice president of student services at Skyline College, dean of student development and matriculation at San Diego Mesa College, and academic senate president at Southwestern College. She holds an EDD in educational leadership with an emphasis in post-secondary education, a Master of Arts in Vocational Rehabilitation Counseling from San Diego State University, and a Bachelor of Arts with a major in Health Science and a minor in Spanish from San Francisco State University. Thank you, Dr. Blake, for joining us. Dr. Hutchinson is president of Chico State and is the first female president in the campus's 130-year history. Thank you. Prior to this role, Dr. Hutchinson served as provost and vice president for academic affairs at California State University, Channel Islands, and was integral to developing SUSE's as one of the fastest growing and most innovative campuses in the CSU system. Yeah, some groupies over there from Channel Islands. Great, great. Dr. Hutchinson began her career in higher education right where she is today at CSU Chico, where she joined the faculty as an assistant professor in the Department of Kinesiology in 1990. She holds a bachelor's degree in physical education, teacher education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a master's from Teachers College, Columbia University in teaching analysis and curriculum development, and a doctorate of education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in teacher education staff development. So thank you for joining us, President Hutchinson. This year's Fireside Chat is focused on the theme of challenges and imperatives. We all know the current climate for higher education is sensitive, fraught with issues, and in a state of constant change and adjustment. As we tap into the wisdom of the women seated beside me, I know we will each gain a new perspective or way of thinking about our individual situations. Like past year's chats, I have a set of questions grouped into topics. Questions within a topic are intended to explore a slightly different aspect of that topic. Each panelist will have an opportunity to respond. This year, we have fewer panelists, so we can spend more time with each and gain deeper insights. And we will have time for questions at the end. So, the first set of questions is about the topic of sea change in higher education. The nature of the current ongoing sea change in terms of the relevance of higher education are the focus of the first topic. Indeed, a Washington, D.C. think tank recently reported that 51% of Americans do not believe a college education is necessary for career success and finding well-paying jobs. In my view, this reported statistic is very concerning when I think about the next generation of leaders and workforce, particularly when I reread reports that indicate Latinos are showing gains in all education attainment measures except attainment of a four-year college degree. And some of the most recent research indicates that Latinos are We're increasing in terms of high school graduation rates and in terms of two-year certificate completions, which is a good thing. But I wonder, what are the long-term effects of that rise, but the lack of a rise at the same time of four-year degrees? So all these things, right? I know I'm not the only person wondering about what's going on and how we tell the narrative of higher education so that people understand the benefit of a four-year degree from the institutions that we're at. So President Haynes, what are your reflections on this sea change? If you would share your thoughts, including how you think about it in your frame of analysis.
Well, first, although we certainly can say that the data point reported may be actually a true fact as reported rather than an alternative fact, what we do know, and what I keep focused on, is what we know, certainly here in California, that every public policy document for the last several years has said that California, by 2030, will need 1.1 million more baccalaureate degree educated people for the workforce needs. And that is 1.1 million more than all sectors of higher education in California are currently delivering. So people may believe it's unnecessary for whatever sets of narratives are out there, but people looking at our state economy and economies like it understand that need for more than high school or high school plus some certificate may bring. Secondly, what to me that says, and what I keep focused on, and what we do in post-secondary higher education, is we also know that the kind of education we provide that connects to industry needs is not just technical, vocational in nature, that it relates to, I sigh, some of the skill sets that seem really missing at a federal conversational level of critical analysis, of effective written and verbal communication. I'm not trying to make a joke here now. Of the ability to understand and increasingly work better across multicultural global boundaries, and to have the ability to be both self-reflective and able to grow. Now, those don't depend on whether it's two-year, four-year public, independent research institutions. Those we have said are really what we focus on, irrespective of the discipline, the department, the workforce needs, even of the projected near term. I also know that what the work we do in taking and making sure those critical skill sets that are transferable over a lifetime, over specific jobs, or even career shifts are essential. But we also know, irrespective of this 51% who believe we may be unnecessary in the future, that as we educate our students, we transform families, we transform communities, we change regions. And if there's nothing that has shown me in the last 8 or 9 months how badly we need that kind of transformation, that ability for our students and beyond to think about the need for critical analysis, for respect of others who are different in all of the aspects of those differences, it seems to me more critical now. So I'm going to say to you that I'm not going to focus on that 51% of the public by however randomly selected or statistically significant. I am going to stay focused on what we do, because I believe what we do is even more critical today than it ever has been.
Thank you. Great. So keeping a focus on the abundance rather than the scarcity, keeping the theme alive. Great. So President Hutchinson, slightly different take on that topic. What do you believe are the leadership implications in this discussion about the value and relevancy of a higher education?
Thank you for that. First, Boy, first let me just say Tiffany's presentation was amazing, and she's a tough act to follow. But I hope we're all going to join in on Let It Ripple. So that's one. Let me compliment some of the things that President Haynes has said, because I was trying to wrap my head around this question. I actually think the responsibility of leadership now at the university is more critical than ever before. And it's important for us to really peel back the layers of this survey information about why are people losing trust in higher education. Is it really on a national scale? Is it local? What is it exactly? And I think if you look at some of the research that's out there, some of the literature that you might read in the Journal of Higher Education, the Chronicle of Higher Education, or Wall Street Journal, or wherever you get your news, there is that level of growing distrust or need for higher education. And who is it with? If you look back over the last 20 years, it really seems that conservative media outlets have been really pushing for a distrust of higher education. And when you look at the percentage points around those students who are of conservative background looking to come to university, they really are losing, the percentage points have dropped something like 20. So in other words, 20 percentage points down that young people from conservative background might feel they don't need, or from working class white might feel they don't need to go to the university, where that might not be the case other places. So I think part of this that we have to think about is looking at the political landscape, how polarized it is at the moment, and really think about, as leaders, how do we continue to build inclusive communities? Because the importance of higher education is more than preparation for a job. It really is about civic engagement, community engagement. It's about promoting the values of humanity, promoting the values of a democratic society, so that liberal arts education, the humanities, in addition to what a student's major may be, are essential for this country going forward. And we've always looked to public universities especially, but universities in general, as promoting and making sure that we accelerate that progress. So that considered, our job is, number one, to continue to create inclusive communities, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in question 2. Secondly, I think as we look at this national survey, it might be important to note that that's a national survey, but think about where San Marcos is, or San Bernardino, or Channel Islands, or Chico for that matter. We are the heart of community. And being in the heart of community, I think one of the things as leaders is to really deepen our partnerships with our local and regional communities, because they do value, along with our students and all the first-generation students we have, our local communities who send their students, their children to us, truly value our relationships. And we can deepen those relationships with them so that families will trust sending their students to us. But then there are things that we're working on already that we need to continue to do, and maybe talk about it more, broadcast it more broadly, and that is accessibility. We must continue to make our universities accessible for everyone, especially underserved and underrepresented, as well as first-generation students. Secondly is affordability, and you know what, we have this challenge in California, but we'll continue to strive for affordability. And then something that I think the CSU is really taking a leadership role in, and that is accountability. And I know this is a tough one because we feel we do a great job in graduating our students, but we need to find a way to communicate more deeply and broadly the good work we're doing around quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and communication through oral and written, along with teamwork and all this other stuff. But those accountability measures, which legislatures are really pressing on us these days, are things that we have to take seriously, and not to operate from fear, but to switch it, like I think Tiffany would say, to really see this as opportunity to share with the world how we transform student lives, how we transform families, and how we prepare them for brighter futures, if you will, and not to be afraid of that accountability. So all of that really puts a lot of critical pressure, I think, on leadership, and I don't see leadership just as with presidents. I see leadership as on all of us, because we all have essential roles into student success at our institutions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting that you said that because it's so regional, right? And the CSUs and the community colleges were all built upon regional systems. And I have to say, when I read the statistics about, 51% or whatever percent don't believe it, when I'm out in the community and working with people, and perhaps I'm only talking to a certain portion of the community, but their belief in what we as an institution can do is deep. It's deep and long, and I do believe they have trust in us. So I think that's a really good point to keep building that trust and showing what we do by our actions and the outcomes that we have.
Thank you.
So President Blake, of course, in any of these questions, always a question about what's the application of the ideas, right? What's the application of what we're thinking about? From your leadership position at your institution, what are the strategies you use to respond to these kinds of sentiments, and how are you positioning your institution to move forward within this sort of thinking about higher ed?
Again, thank you, Karen, for having us here today. I'm kind of I call myself a transforming nonconformist, okay? And so, and I have this little plaque on my desk about color outside the lines. And I think that what I find, and I've worked at several districts, is that a lot of community colleges, because we accept the top 100%, it's open access. Anyone can attend a community college. But in a lot of our institutions, we are married to the status quo. And so the challenge for leadership in our system, and I just know in my experience, has been getting folks to be willing to take that risk and to do things differently to serve our communities, because our communities are real diverse. And so when we look at providing access for students and access for higher ed for our students, what does that look like? And it's not just getting in, but it's keeping them in. And keeping them in until they complete or achieve whatever their goal is. Because we often think it's a certificate, associate degree transfer to a four-year institution, but a lot of times it may only be learning enough English to help their children do their homework, because that's their goal. But as a leader, I tend to challenge my staff to go above and beyond and to be forward thinking. We're opening our North Education Center next summer, and so we were looking at the programming, and so they came back with a plan on how we're going to have a health and public safety and business administration program there. And I said, well, so what? We already do that. How are we preparing our students for the jobs that don't exist? So challenging them to think about being futuristic in their approach to providing a higher education. And sometimes I'm that lone voice there, but empowering my administrative team, faculty and staff to be more forward thinking and not do what's comfortable, and to kind of, as I say, not collude with the status quo. And, thinking of that data, it's convenient narrative and it's oppressive narrative. And so, when we talk about cracking the code, and so that's code for oppression, especially when we look at the sea of cultural change and ethnic change in California. That's oppressive language for people of color. It's oppressive language for women. It's continuing the marginalization of certain communities. And so as a leader, it's cracking the code, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and what's really being said, but creating that critical consciousness on your campus so folks can see what the real narrative is. The other issue is, given that's the narrative, then how do we look at what we do? Because we're stewards of opportunity for our students, building social capital and cultural capital that they don't have. They don't have a lot of students. 60% of the students that come to Palomar from our high schools are on free and reduced lunch. And so when you talk about access, we just opened up our college that all graduating high school seniors can come to Palomar for free and get textbook assistance. So And my campus was a little, you know, we were part of the the San Marcos Promise, but it was kind of exclusive because you had to have a 2.5 college ready. I'm like, well, what about the 1.8s and 2.0s? Because we take everybody, right? But my staff struggled with it because it was a risk. Their foundation knew they were going to have to raise a lot of money, but I challenged them, just step out there, given the data, we can do it. And we were extremely successful. I was able to get $1 million donor out the gate, 500,000. Now we just have the money coming in to support our initiative. But I had to be bold, I had to be courageous, but I had to empower them and support them to let them see it's a moral and ethical imperative for us to do this. Because we're not doing our job if we don't serve this community. And, you know, yes, we're educating folks. Yes, we're helping them to be critical thinkers and analytic and global citizens. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that, especially given the political climate. And speaking of the political climate, and I'll shut up because I know I've got Herb and go, but I think we need to look at it as an opportunity, because I think what's happened to a lot of our young people, they don't realize the diversity and everything that they enjoy right now is on the backs of a lot of those folks who are in those videos. Folks died, sacrificed for them to enjoy diverse environments, access to higher education, the ability to vote, and they don't vote. And, you know, some folks are choosing not to pursue higher education. People fought for that. So now they can see that you're going to have to fight to keep it. Because wanting America back means women aren't included, means people of color aren't included, means higher education is not accessible, means economic mobility and prosperity for certain communities. Healthcare is not going to be available. So they're going to have to fight to keep that. So as an educational leader of higher ed, we need to enlighten them, but seize this opportunity that we're faced with to help educate them and help them understand the gravity of what's facing them. And so I'll stop there.
Thank you for cracking the code in a bold and courageous way. Thanks. So we'll turn to another pressing imperative, which is, as you've already just brought up, diversity and inclusion. In reaction to publicly espoused views in recent events, much of the nation is, with good reason, focused on issues of diversity and inclusion. Perhaps even more so our higher education institutions and leaders. The number of hot button issues seems to be constantly increasing. Free speech, DACA, white nationalism, gender equity, and so on. I have no doubt that each of us here today has at least one or more stories of how our campuses have been impacted by these issues. So, President Hutchinson, how do you continue to lean in and lean forward as a leader in this context?
Thank you for this question. And it's imperative that we continue to lean in, if you will. And I want to compliment President Blake on her comments, because many of our students are really dealing with a lot more than what's going on in their course or class. And they're even, I think, meeting some racism and sexism and other isms in their classes as well. So it is a very stressful time for our young people. I think the story I'll begin with just briefly is that after the presidential election, many of our campuses, people were really upset. And people were upset on both sides of the coin, if you will. Conservatives and Democrats were very upset. And in Chico, I know it became volatile in that many of our students of color, our students from the LGBTQ community, really did feel unsafe. And interestingly enough, some of our conservative groups felt unsafe. But the number of incidents that I would say were hate incidents or hate crimes increased. So planning ahead as a leader who leads in, and I would say all of the presidents have done this in the CSU, and I'm sure the community colleges, that we planned in advance for what might have been something imaginable happening and the election going the direction it did. And what we did to plan in advance, expecting social unrest to really accelerate or be heightened, is that we all created critical incidents response teams, if you will. Some of us have had those in place. Others needed to renew those and maybe expand their charge, make it, a little bit broader in terms of what are we looking at. So as we think about what has transpired over the last year with not only presidential election and DACA healthcare and a number of other incidences that have happened, shootings, et cetera, this team meets very frequently, and it coincides or collaborates very closely with our care team, who really does reach out and provide services to our students. One thing that came from the election is a real conversation about how do we bring our students together to really begin having conversations with people other than themselves in arenas or forums where they feel relatively safe to hear and experience divergent points of view, which really is essential, again, in a democratic society. And we really aim to focus on the Bill of Rights and focus especially on freedom of speech and try to prepare our faculty and our staff with strategies they could use to have these productive conversations, disagreements, discourse, debate, and really begin to help our students understand how they might engage with real facts, not fake news, to really do so in a way that spoke their mind, maybe even a protest, but also with the ability to listen and hopefully learn to empathize, to hear what the other side is saying. And in doing so, when you think about operating from a spirit of abundance, in doing so is really not to persuade necessarily the other one, but begin to understand where the other is coming from and try to find a space where we can build common ground. And this is what I like about what Tiffany Shalane was showing us today with Let It Ripple, is really looking for humanity, core values, if you will, around humanity, and bring people into the room to really deepen that understanding. So we established an Our Democracy webpage to help us with this. On that are tools that faculty can use in their classrooms, and even tools to help students understand how they might engage in these types of interactions or engage in protest in what I would say is a productive and responsible way. So freedom of speech is important, helping people understand that they have a voice, and it's important for all voices to be heard, but to do so in a productive way. And what I mean by productive is really to protest if you feel strongly, but to do so in a way that doesn't hopefully lead to violence, but does so in a way that really allows you to voice your concern to the other, and also an opportunity to listen to the other. I don't know if you heard President Carol Christ on an NPR interview. This was beautiful. So she was talking about all that's going on at Cal Berkeley and the protests and some of the interesting people that were coming to the campus. And she was encouraging free speech, and she was encouraging protest. And she told the story when she was president at Smith College. And she said there was a highly controversial person who came to Smith to speak. And they decided, the students, to allow this person. They weren't going to be disruptive. And they filled the auditorium. It was packed. And this person started espousing things that really go against humanity and even perhaps would be considered egregious, and certainly against social and civil rights. And every 15 minutes, a block of students in the audience stood quietly and turned their back on the speaker, and then silently walked out. And about 15 minutes later, another group of students stood quietly, turned their back to the speaker, and silently walked out. All of this in protest. They were listening, they were trying to understand divergent point of view, and they were making a statement. And I think it is imperative at these times that we figure out how to come together to help our students find their voice, voice their concern, like we are doing right now with DACA and creating a Right to Your Legislature Day that's going to be system-wide. And we credit our students for getting that together. But that as President Blake said we're stewards of opportunity, and I see us also stewards with regard to and really bold with regard to civil rights, and really helping our students understand that and creating supportive environments that will allow them not only to express themselves, but to experiment with it in ways that really uphold the Constitution of this, I was going to say university, but United States.
It's a little bit bigger than
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
We
bigger
embody
than
it in a certain way, right? So President Blake, in keeping with that kind of theme about the action, and as particularly as we're a group of women who have gathered today, what kinds of conversations are you having with women leaders? And what is your sense of how we are truly faring at moving the needle?
I think it's important for us, as Tiffany talked about, mentoring. I had some great mentors, and they encouraged me to move into administration. You know, I love being a faculty member. I had tenure. You know, I could say whatever I wanted whenever, you know. So, I enjoyed that, right? So, but, you know, they encouraged me and they believed in me. And I remember one of my presidents, I was the Academic Senate president, and we just testified at the Board of Governors, and we were on the plane, and she was really pleased with my presentation. And she said, Joy, you need to be a president. I go, are you kidding me? I don't want to do that. And then she created opportunities for me to grow as a leader. And then I moved on to another college as a dean. And that president took me under her wing and helped me and guided me and had some of those special mentor moments when I would stick my foot in my mouth and they remind me I wasn't a Senate president anymore. But just help nurture my leadership and nurture and help me find my true self and who I was and my voice as a leader. And so I'm giving that back to my colleagues because I know how important it is to have women at the table, to be that conscience that sometimes gets lost and forgotten about. And in community colleges, we have a significant number of the CEOs and presidents. We have chancellors that are district CEOs and superintendent presidents, as myself. And then we have presidents that report to chancellors. It's kind of interesting organizational structure. But there are more coming into the field. My colleagues that I grew up with as deans and VPs, I really encourage them to do it, because we have a spirit of social justice and equity, and, you know, we had to be better than our male counterparts just to get there, had to be bolder, had to, you know, take more risk in some areas. And so I encourage them to do it because I go, we're going to be the change that needs to be made. And so, I just think it's really important and not shy away from it. Actually, I love it. It's stressful though, but you know, it's stressful. No, I always tell folks you need that emotional agility,
Yes,
and
you
people
do.
don't tell you that because people think, you know, we get to sit up here on stage, we get to sit at the front table, front row at the performances and all that. However, you know, emotional agility came to me one morning at 7 o'clock. I had the union on the phone yelling at me about something I was doing, and I'm like, sorry, we're going to have to agree to disagree. So I had to get out the car, go in my office, and prepare for a welcome to let people know we were the best college in North County. And then I had to go sit with attorneys to try to resolve this lawsuit that we were having at one of our sites. And then I had to go and do discipline, all within the span of 6 hours. There was nothing glamorous about that, you know. Or when we were told that there may be a protest on our campus by the white supremacists. And so trying to mobilize the campus, getting ready just in case it happens. And so I was supposed to go out of town, but I stayed back because I didn't know what that was going to look like. It's a new campus. I didn't know how prepared they were. And so doing that, as well as manage a board and, you know, that other stuff. But So you have to have the emotional agility to do it, and it's not always fun. And I don't know about you all, but
And stamina.
right. And I never get to eat. I like to eat, but I never get to eat. You know, seize every opportunity. But my folks are like, we're getting text messages at 3 in the morning. Because we have to keep our phones with us. We have to be available. Because if anything happens, we are the person in charge, and the buck stops with us. And so, what does that look like? Especially, and we're going to talk about work and life balance. Okay. So, but anyway, but you have to have the emotional agility to do the work. So, but I think women are cut out for it because we have to do it all the time anyway.
You're good at multitasking.
We have to do that, yeah, that's right.
I agree.
Emotional agility, that's a great concept. And that's very apropos for our next question, because it's about, to President Haynes, how it seems every leadership decision with regard to these kinds of hot-button issues is fraught with unintentional outcomes. And I sit with this woman at the table as we're trying to solve things, and Kathy Bauer over there as well. So we know the kinds of conversations we have and how we jump from one thing to another. So what can you tell us about our institutional level responses to the various hot-button issues of diversity and inclusion, and how you've navigated these waters?
Okay, thank you. Well, as Patricia knows, and maybe some of you do, so I am a social worker by background. So I would start there by saying I am grounded, and was grounded before I ever became a president, in a certain set of values. Inclusiveness, social justice, diversity, the person and environment, the need to look at individuals without stereotypes. So that's a background. When I came into public higher education, but particularly to this institution, when it was 14 years young, they were grounded in a set of similar values. What I experienced was, and that is wonderful, and you need that grounding, but then you need, with some intentionality and strategy, to think about how you move from a set of values and talking points to actually strategy and measurement, right? So it was an opportunity for me here at a young university, already grounded in social justice and multiculturalism and diversity and equity, to start talking about what are, not only those, but what are strategic priorities that we can have intentional actions, activities, and we can stay, and I think I'm doing this to get us to the question of how has that, I think, grounded Cal State San Marcos. So interesting, in the year-long conversation about what's important to us, there were consistent pieces. Obviously, academic excellence, nothing new to the academy, right? The focus on students and student life. And obviously at this institution, a very long, 14 years long, commitment to diversity, social justice. Nothing, however, that was really very strategic about that third one. And the two pieces that seem to me missing, that I think have been central for our work and our focus, was campus climate. What about what we value, not only about and for our students, but for our employees, for each other in conversation? And if we say, as a public comprehensive university, we are here to serve the region, what are we doing strategically about connecting to the region? And I look to my colleague here, who's the Vice President of Community Engagement, the only one in the 23 CSUs where we have a whole division on community engagement. So with that backdrop to current issues, we had already then begun some of those purposive strategies of what does it mean if we have values and beliefs, but we really aren't creating the strategies to get there. So 8 or more years ago, we took, for example, diversity and said, well, it's nice that we do some of these things. We had activities, but we didn't have strategies around them in terms of diversity. How do we create the pathway, for example, for a chief diversity officer, an officer of inclusive excellence? We started at least 8 or so years ago, finished our second strategic plan in diversity just a year ago that obviously the diversity strategic plan, aligns and cascades up to this university strategic plan. Hired a new chief diversity officer just last January, and I know Jojo McManus is here with us today, but then had an office that could take those sets of values, not only and go to them in good times and in crises, but also then create strategies, create proactively a whole series of conversations that matter that we started 4 years ago, and obviously have done us well in recent times, that we created sets of ways to, across not only student groups, across employee groups, continue to focus on what about our campus climate do we hold dear and special, and what are the strategies and actions that actually can make it stay as positive as possible when things come at us that I think a year ago we would have thought unlikely, if not impossible. So the groundedness and values that then for me, sort of compelled me to say, this is a wonderful place to go, knowing your values. But you need to then have a pathway of where do we go? And then you need to have some ways of measuring, is that making a difference? Is that making it better? So we have really sort of done that over the years. We've had, before we started 2 years ago in the system talking about it, we have had a critical incidents team called by a different name years ago, because and that, I would say, years ago was more reactive in focus than now proactive in focus, doing both. But so we really built, fortunately, a set of strategies, building blocks on a set of very solid values that has helped us keep a steadier hand in very unpredictable, very, Joy Lynn was talking about, emotional agility. I mean, these times have created all kinds of needs for emotional agility that I have not ever experienced in 23 years of being a university president. But, certainly value-based, to me, grounds a lot of what we now are facing. And then building or having or going back to the practices we know work, going back to, does this make a difference? And then being able to be also create on the fly the practices, the teams that can come together, cross divisions, cross universities, connecting with community partners often, that allow us to not only deal internally at this university with what might happen or what has just happened, but certainly through a lot of Patricia's leadership that also allows us to help educate and get help from the communities in the region that work with us, and then help us keep educating them along the way. So we have been very proactive, very strategic, and we still find ourselves, obviously, in these times without knowing what the next specific issue is to prepare for. But I would say to you, all of us, we go to our values first, and that helps.
Thank you. Thank you. I can attest to that as well. So finally, we'll turn to the topic of self-care and motivation. So all of us know that leadership is not easy and requires a commitment that goes above and beyond most other jobs. We also know that neglect of ourselves complicates the work. So as President Blake says, those days when you don't get a chance to eat, at the end of the day, I am much more likely to go to the plate of French fries and a glass of Tempranillo than I am to a salad, right? These are the things these are the important decisions. So over the years, we have heard your colleagues, the women presidents and chancellors who have sat here, talk about their strategies for life balance and sustaining focus and heart. So President Blake, please share with us, in these different times, what are you doing to ensure balance, engage in self-care, and make time to renew? And have you found it necessary to adapt your strategies?
Yes. I've been at Palomar a year, and so you kind of need to be at the campus to get to know the campus. But I think it's really important to travel and get out of the environment and just have a fresh look, because I get a lot of my energy in the Myers-Briggs, my ENFP. But anyway, but I get a lot of my energy from my environment, and so it's good for me to just to disconnect for a minute. Last week was rough, and so we were at a dinner Friday night, and my VP, I love him to death, but type A, let's get it done, I'll text you, call you. So I looked over at him, I go, do not call me, do not text me, don't email me, because I'm off the grid. Unless something really happens, but I'm off the grid. And I had to do that. So when Tiffany was talking about the Sabbath, you know, that's important. And actually, I do observe the Sabbath, so I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. But loosely, you know, not as strictly as she does. But having that time to come aside and rest a while and reflect. You know, earlier this year, I went to Costa Rica, which is great. And Costa Rica is one of the blue zones. I think there's 6 to 8 of them. And that's where people live well over 100 years old. And they have like 8 characteristics. And one of them is they value family. They eat well, they exercise. I forgot the rest of them. But anyway, but what got me was they value family and friends. And they take care of their physical body. And so I really, I start walking and just doing things where I can just reflect, and just taking in my environment. And once I had the epiphany around the emotional agility piece, I had to ask myself, does that really have to be due on the 11th? Because you're stressing everybody out, can it wait? But just kind of measuring. And, I had a president that was she was bold, and I really learned a lot from her. But we never could tell what was important and what was urgent. Mm-hmm. They were kind of, and it was just driving us crazy. And she said, oh, Joy, come on, let's go to happy hour. I go, I can't. You wanted that yesterday, And so I've had to step back and ask myself that, especially for my team, because I have a sense of urgency about the work. But, is it urgent or is it a have to do right now? And so, and if I do that check-in with myself, and I've asked them to do that check-in and help me check in, because sometimes I go, this is not a good day for you, is it? But just that self-reflection. And I don't know if you've read the book In Every One Culture. I was in this institute at UC Davis, and that was one of the readings. And it talks about, honoring the truth, reflecting, and being resilient. And so I think in order to maintain that balance, you have to honor your truth in terms of what your limits are, what your boundaries are, and what your capacity is, and the capacity of your team. And then just being resilient, because some of those, when I was a vice president, I kind of didn't make a decision fast enough. And I was sitting with my president because we were carpooling at BART, or carpooling in the Bay Area, at the BART, 6 o'clock in the morning, waiting for someone. And, I said, Regina, I want to apologize because I never wanted to embarrass you. And I feel like I let you down. And she sat there and she said, Joy, some days we're 100%, but then some days we're 50, 60%, and it's okay. And so in terms of looking at balance, being okay with knowing that you're not always going to be 100%, because the job and the work is challenging, and be okay with that. And doesn't mean that you're not a great CEO or you're not a great leader. It's just the day was just off day, and that has to be okay for you to continue on and provide the leadership and the vision for your campus or your project or whatever you're leading, whether you're a formal or informal leader, but be okay with that some days you're not going to be 100%.
Thank you. That was great. Now, President Haynes, you have said more than once that to encourage others to advance to presidencies, you believe it is one of your obligations to tell positive stories of being president.
I have said that.
Yes, you have said that. I've heard it. So if you would, tell us, why do you believe a president is a great choice and aspiration?
And I hope some of the women from San Marcos, if not some of you in this room beyond San Marcos, have heard me say, I, never wanted to be a president for a lot of reasons. I'm going to come back to that. But what I have wanted to be is in public higher education for more than 3 decades. And being a president really allows you to focus on the transformational things that we do and can do for students, families, regions, and beyond. It allows you to engage with some of the best minds on your campus in the faculty. It allows you to talk with students in the diversity that our campuses represent and realize more opportunities to create new practices. It is never dull. It is about balance, and that's possible, and you've heard me say that. But it really is, back to values and transformation, it is what gives me passion and energy to still be a university president 23 years later. It is what gives me the passion and excitement about this university, Cal State San Marcos, because what I'm saying to you, I believe, is reflected in the broader leadership of this campus, is that passion. And it is, I would say to you, that for me, being a president is also possible and exciting and energy producing, because for me, I also believe it is essential to be authentic. So I'm not trying to look and sound and be like somebody else, quite obviously. I mean, and I think that we all have to find that also, that authenticity in ourselves, values, perspectives, interpersonal relationships, strategies that not only are for the university and for our students, but don't feel artificial, don't feel so constrained. We all live, or some of us live in really big bureaucracies, right, Gail?
Right.
But that really can allow that authenticity so that the passion can come through, so that the excitement of the transformations, of the abilities to continue to have people around you who bring you out of the box ideas, and you're willing, calculated risk-taking, but willing to do that. Those are exciting. All of this other stuff may be bureaucracy, may be getting in the way. Some of it you can ignore at your risk, but you can ignore some of it, you can go around it, and you can push through it. And in the end, if you're not passionate, if you're not authentic, if you haven't found a voice that is your voice in moving this forward, then I think you're going to be less satisfied. But if you have that voice, if you have that value, if you have those visions, and if you have and get excited people around you who keep you up when you have that tough day and you're 60% rather than 100%. Because a lot of us in this room are probably A+ personalities, right? But we all still have those 60% days. So I have colleagues around me that will give me permission to have those days once in a while. And I hope that what I do is also, with all of what I ask from them to support me, that I have absolutely an obligation to try to support them in the same way. And when you get that kind of mutual support on a campus, or I think we have some of it, Gail, in our system among the presidents, that also you have a built-in support network and people who bring you up and ignite a passion if it's dying. And it is exciting. And I'm sorry if you can't feel my excitement 23 years later as a president. I can say some more, but it really is getting beyond what has to be done, getting beyond what will happen despite your best efforts, and keeping excited about the opportunity to lead, I think, the most important sector in our nation today. And it is what gets me up every day. And then the other exciting opportunity is being at an event like this, which re-energizes me just to be in this room with all of you.
Oh, great, thank you. We probably allow her one day a month to be off on Kathy. Yeah. Jennifer, yeah, right. One day. President Hutchinson, what one piece of advice are you dying to share with the women leaders in this room? Single piece. Who are looking to grow and develop as higher education leaders.
So I'm going to quote a dear friend, President Emeritus Dick Rush, and I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege and not limit it to one word. So a couple of things that I think are important to share with you, and I really want to join my colleagues up here, and that is balance is a concept. Balance is something that you strive for. You'll never achieve balance If you do, it's only for a moment. And I like to think of it as a concept that I strive for, and I dial up or dial down. But you have to keep balance in mind. And I live by 3 principles. I've done this my entire life. And I will tell you that I also am a woman with a disability. I have 34 years insulin dependent. So I live with an insulin pump, and health is really, really important to me. But I've never let health, I've always strived for good health, and I never let living with a disease slow me down. So my 3 principles are health first, then come family, or however you define family. It may include your friends, and then where your passion lies. And that passion for me is my work, because I agree with my colleagues. I have just this great honor to serve as a leader in higher education, because education is the most important thing to me in terms of helping young people. My roots are humble. I started as a credentialed teacher before I even made it into higher education. So health, family, and then where your passion is. And then I could go on some other things, but it really is important that you are principled in your leadership. And I think all of us, as we have our emotional agility, really stay true to that authentic self, really stay true to being trustworthy and honest and fair-minded with integrity, and try very hard to be bold and respectful and empathetic, and all of these things that really create that authentic self, so that when you have to move from a difficult challenge to a less difficult challenge, back to a difficult challenge, you know you're putting your heart and soul into making the most informed and passionate and valued decision that you possibly can make, and that I know helps each of us sleep at night. And then if I were to leave you with some advice for your future in terms of where you see yourselves going, first and foremost, aspire. You must aspire. I know you're all sitting out there and you have a dream of things you really want to be doing. And don't hold back. I say dream, aspire toward those goals and set goals. And then begin engaging in a process of visualization. Athletes do this all the time. Great Olympians who win medals sit and they visualize. They literally visualize the steps they take and where they're going and how they're going to perform at that high level. And you too can visualize as you set those goals. But you have to be bold enough to take action. You've got to be bold enough to take action. And what that tells me is when you're willing to take a risk, you're willing to fail. In my book, there is absolutely no failure, only feedback. No failure, just feedback. And I think you need to look at it that way, because oftentimes what stands between us and the goals we set are ourselves, So this is where mentors really come in. And each of us have had significant individuals in our lives, and mine begins with my high school coach when I was 15 years old. My mother was more traditional, and she did not expect, nor my father expect much from me. But my high school coach kicked my butt and said, "You have so much potential." So my life goal has been to help others strive toward their potential. But that's one mentor in what I like to think of as a constellation of mentors, a Milky Way, if you will. Because look at all the stars that you have in your lives that surround you, that support you. All you have to do is take advantage of what they have to offer and be a little bold and ask them for help now and again. But know that they're there for you to see you be successful.
Thank you. Thank you, each of you. Please, let's give them a round of applause. I know I speak for everyone, I'm sure, when I express deep appreciation for your authenticity and honesty and candor with us today. So we do have time for questions. If anyone has any questions for us. Yeah, we'll get you a microphone.
So this might be a little controversial, but what do you say or do to the people who do not give you or suppress your license to be genuine and passionate out of their own threat of their egos?
What I want to say is get over it. But to me, that is a really good question, and I think of all of a sudden that my life goes beyond,
Well,
in
I
front
think
of my eyes.
we have a lot of practice.
Right,
at this,
right. Yes. Yeah. But I think it's situation specific, how you deal with it. Two, I also find that sometimes, for me, humor is a good deflector rather than direct controversy or conflict. And I also try not to let moments like that go without maybe creating, through humor, sometimes through direct confrontation, some teachable moment of what they are missing in what I think is an important perspective.
This is an interesting question. I take a martial arts approach. Maybe you're seeing my kinesthetic background. And when I think about some of the martial arts, it's not about being combative with the energy, but it's about really feeling that energy and bringing it in, bring it toward you, flow with it. So listening is so important as a leader. We have to listen. And if I find someone who maybe is more ego but has a very strong opinion, it is important for me to listen. It is important for me, as I listen, to really try to dive down into what the real issue is. As I dive into what the issue is, maybe I, through a guided facilitation process, help that person realize what the question is, or maybe I'm pretty direct and say, my gosh, that was a confusing message. I hear this and I hear this. Which is it, or are there priorities, or can we dive deeper? So I engage in that facilitation process. And if we can get to a point where there's some identification of what the issue is, maybe we can work through it. If there is an identification of where our differences are, maybe there's common ground where we can build the solution. And at the end of the day, if none of that technique works, then sometimes it's just important to be very, very direct in terms of what the challenge is. But always, as you be direct, it's never putting someone down, it's being direct and being about what the goal is or what the task needs to be or what the behavior needs to be.
Like Karen, I use humor, so snarly humor sometimes, but but I use humor, and then one thing I've learned is some things don't warrant a response.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So or I'll ask folks, well, why don't you unpack that for me so I can understand kind of where we're going with this, right? But typically. Sometimes it's just their ignorance. They don't even know, especially as a person of color. I'm just like, they don't know what they just said. Don't get mad, because they don't know. But then the other thing is, no one can take away my authenticity. I'm going to be Joy, right? And so you can say and be whoever you are, but you're not going to define me. And I have a lot of clarity around that. And so, but typically, some things just don't warrant a response, because I'm thinking, my thought bubble is, you have got to be kidding me. I'm like, oh, my PIO, we were walking the other day, and she was in a meeting, and faculty said something to her. She said, I did a Joy Blake. Wow, that's interesting. And you just keep going. She said, because it would have been an argument, and we weren't going to agree. And, she said, oh, I haven't looked at it that way. I have about 10 of those, right? But.
Well, and this is where as President Haynes says, it's context specific.
Right.
Because you can have these interactions when you're taking a walk or a meeting in your office, or you've got 8 people in the room, or you're standing in front of an auditorium with 1,000 people and someone decides to call you out. And you have to really kind of navigate each of those situations to the best of your ability.
And I had to tell my staff, because at Palomar, I'm the first president of color. And, 70 years, it's been all white males, one white female, but she didn't make it long. The campus club.
She made it.
She made it like for years, I think. But anyway, because they'll tell me, we were at an event, Karen, you were there, and Sonny Cook was there, the president of MiraCosta.
And they just bragged about Cal State San Marcos and MiraCosta. And so my team, we're at the table, and we're like, I'm hot, because I'm like, somebody didn't do their job, because they should be talking about Palomar. But, but I'm sitting there, and so afterwards, I'm like, what happened here? How did they forget Palomar, right? And my staff said, well, Karen, don't take this wrong. They said, see, that was Karen. She would have got up and walked out, her and her whole table. And I said, but I had to educate them and say, I couldn't do that because I would have been an angry black female.
Oh, yeah.
I said, they said, well, Dr. Blake, you could have gone to the mic and said, well, how does Palomar play into that? I said, well, I would have been a black woman with attitude. I said, so I had to educate them on, I said, but it won't happen again. And it hasn't happened again. And I didn't have to do anything. My PIO knows whenever I go anywhere, she better make sure not my egos are wrapped up in this, but that they need to know I'm in the room, that Palomar is in the room.
Exactly.
That we get our due recognition, and that, but I said, but the person who did it, they just weren't thinking, and she forgot to tell them, so that was another conversation, but it just is sometimes, and sometimes I don't think there's any malintent behind it. Sometimes it is, but I'm not going to waste my oxygen.
Okay, another question. Okay, Catalina? Oh, go back there.
Ladies, thank you so much for this presentation. I've heard so much about authenticity in leadership, especially in spaces where we're told not to be quite so much of ourselves. I'm really interested in hearing how, if you could mentor yourself, say 30 years ago, what would you say to encourage you to go beyond where you are now? Got it?
Yeah,
Okay.
30, not longer.
That's a long time ago, yeah. I would have I really would have encouraged me to be more aggressive in terms of getting here because given what my colleagues shared, the opportunity to impact change, I could have done it sooner. And if when I sit at the table and I say we should address food insecurity and have a pantry, and that has to happen by this date, I get to impact that. I can make that happen. But I feel like if I had been more intentional in my career and kind of been more focused, I could have made more of a change in all the other places. I mean, I made change, but I could have been more impactful then. So I wish I had embraced it sooner, and because there's just so much opportunity to transform, and I think there were some lost moments there. So I would just taken the risk sooner and done some different types of experiences.
I think I would have done the same. I'm going back 30 years ago is when I was starting as an assistant professor. And the messages were clear, especially in kinesiology and sports, that women really don't matter much. And so I have always been outspoken. But I think I would have pushed myself a little harder to get where I am now sooner, not knowing this would be where I was. But to be that outspoken advocate earlier in career, I think I did a fairly good job because I've always been engaged in social justice. But I now realize I could have done more. And had I known that when you sit in a role of president, the amount of transformational opportunity you have, especially around social justice, is huge. I would have definitely kicked my career into gear a little bit faster. And that's encouragement for all of you. As you think about your interests in social justice and making sure that you want to help others, especially those underserved, don't sit back. Set those goals and be bold and start making tracks toward that end.
So as a woman of a certain age, I'm going to go back a little more than 30 years when I give myself advice. And one of them, because I am of that age and stage, would have been really find the women, as few as they were around, who have succeeded in higher education. I'm of a generation where I never worked for a female president. I never worked for a female dean. I was often the only, even in social work, in the policy end, the only woman. I would have said to myself, you're not looking hard enough to find the mentors, the coaches, the supporters to help you get there. I also, if I look back 30 plus years, would have said to myself, unmuffle your voice.
Yes.
It took me a while to not only get more into my more authentic self, but to own and be okay with a voice that was different at many of the tables and the spaces where I existed. And I wish I had said those two things to myself 30 plus years ago.
Thank you. So we have a question up here with Regina.
Thank you. Not to get too political, but if you'd asked me up until November 7th of last year about my attitude towards women in this country, people of color in this country, I would have said hopeful, that we had come a long way, that things were changing and changing for the better. And then November 8th happened, and I struggle to find the hope anymore. And I realize that that is not operating from a place of abundance, but of scarcity. But so what advice would you give to people like me, to women like me, who feel that we've come far, but it's never going to change?
Jolene, do you want to take this, or do you need to?
Yeah, can I answer and I'll go?
Yeah,
Okay,
President Blake needs to excuse herself, yeah.
Needs to be emotionally agile.
Right, that's right. It's like, okay, that's your question. I got to do it now. You know what? I'm a possibilitarian, and like I said, I see everything that's going on. I am, and I look at everything as an opportunity, and just not as like I told my campus, they were so down after the election. I said, folks, this is an opportunity for us. This is an opportunity for us to rise. This is an opportunity for us to use our privilege to impact change, and not to give up. Start getting ready. Let's do the voter registration campaign. Start now, right? But do what we need to do. And so as a leader, and people are looking to me for the vision, for the future, for the institution, and the community folks are looking to me as a community leader. I have to be hopeful, and you need to hold on to that. And not just like they can't take our authenticity, they can't take our hope. And you can't let them do that, or let anyone ever do that to you. My mom used to tell me, whatever you're pursuing is yours till they tell you no, and then they made a mistake. So
I like that.
So they're making policy decisions now. Some of them they're making a mistake, and it's for us to bring it to their awareness, to be in their face, to be bold and courageous, and let it ripple and not give up, and we just have to risk more. We're going to have to care a little more, and we're going to have to expect a little more from ourselves to make the change, but never give up and never let anybody take your hope and the possibilities away from you and the impact you can make. And so with that, I'll head on up the road, okay? Thank you.
Joy. Bye, Joy. So I too was very disappointed with the election result. And I remember going to bed that night thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. And waking up in the morning and realizing that as much as I wanted to stay in bed, I could not, because I had an entire university that was really waiting for leadership. And so I think Joy's advice is quite good, that we don't give up, that this is, I think, a setback, a strong setback, but it is an opportunity here for all of us to rise and to really engage in the democratic process like we've never done in a very long time. And I'll go back to the film that Tiffany was showing us, where the suffrage movement, and it took these women 70 years. And how long did it take African American to get the vote? So when you think about the pioneers who went before us for these strong improvements in our country, and they never gave up. They may never live to see it. I hope we do. And just as a upbeat note, my dad, who was a diehard Boston Red Sox fan, actually lived to see them win the World Series. That's right. And then he passed soon after that, but he lived to see it. So my hope, and I will never give up hope, my hope is that we'll live to see it. But as we go through and think about what happened, again, there is no failure, only feedback. And this is not a time to sulk. This is a time to really examine what happened and start thinking about how we engage ourselves and involve ourselves in ways we haven't for a very long time to make sure that we position the next woman for the President of the United States very soon and with a lot more support than what I think we saw.
Regina, what I think, in addition to what my two colleagues here have said, is one, I have always said leadership has to be about optimism and hope.
Mm-hmm.
That is both an absolute about leadership and what makes us successful as institutions. For me, it's also the glass half full, and being optimistic is a learned characteristic and one I think is important. But also, as I see you in this room and I hear my two dear colleagues speak, I have to remain optimistic because of our collective commitment and the talent of the women who are in leadership positions, that somehow this too, we will make positive changes, be smarter about it, and I hope I live to see that day when we elect a woman president.
I think we have time for one more question before we break for lunch. Yes.
I have a question about your educational credentials, and at what point in your careers did you earn your advanced degrees, and how vital was that to reaching your goals?
You want to start?
So I went directly from an undergraduate degree, BA, in sociology, psychology, major minor, into an MSW program immediately. I knew social work was my passion. It was an opportunistic time for me to do that. And then with an MSW, I thought I would be a practicing social worker, not clinical, policy, program, macro practice. And my life changed, and I was all of a sudden not in Montreal at McGill University. I was in the middle of Texas in the early 1970s. Wow. And there were no roles for those kinds of social workers. But what opened up for me was nationally, that was the beginning of baccalaureate social work programs. And what I did, which I still sometimes can't believe I was audacious enough, having just said I didn't find my voice, was not being able to find what I thought I would do for the rest of my life. I thought, 31 years old, an MSW in my hand, or maybe younger than that, actually. And I literally drew a circle around Austin and applied to every university program, public, private, and said, I can help you build a BSW program. I don't know why I thought I could do that, except I had an MSW. And then you know what? Somebody thought I could. And that changed my entire career trajectory. 4 years later, I entered a doctoral program because I became so passionate about students and social work, and knew I needed a terminal degree to be successful as a faculty member. So it was actually, I realized that the first time I was only 24, I finished a doctorate at 31.
So my brothers and I are first in our family to go to college. My father had a high school education, my mom too. And my grandparents, one was 8th grade and indentured from Holland, and the other side, high school. So when I got to college, it was really clear, because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, that women, girls, really became nurses, teachers,
workers.
or social workers. So I looked at those three and I thought, well, teaching might be the most fun. So I decided I really wanted to be an archaeologist, and to this day, I still want to be one. But so I went into teaching. So back in the day when you could be credentialed in 4 years, so I was out teaching at the age of 22. And I'll never forget the first senior class in that high school where I was teaching when one of the boys asked me to be his date at the prom. And we had to have a talk about professionalism. But before I left with my teaching credential to go teach, the department chair, a man, a great guy, he said, you know, Gail, you would be really great as a university professor. Well, oh my God, what does that mean? He goes, okay, well, this is what I want you to do. Literally, he said, go teach for 4 years, get some real life experience. Get your master's while you're teaching, and then come back here and earn your doctorate. So being a good girl, I taught for 4 years and earned my master's at Teachers College, Columbia University. They had a great scholarship program for teachers, so it cost me, I wasn't making any money, so it didn't hardly cost me anything. And when I got my master's completed, sure enough, I went right back and earned my doctorate from the University of Massachusetts. And then as I was completing my dissertation, I had the opportunity to work on a grant, large grant, with exercise physiology. So I got to I loved living in Amherst, so I had a great softball team I was playing on, wasn't in a hurry to leave. But when the grant was running out, it became clear to me I had to get a job. I had a professorship at UT Austin, which they pulled out from under me back in the day before you could do PDFs over email. They pulled it out from under me, so I landed with absolutely no job and quite desperate. And the UT department chair felt really bad for me, so he said, hey, I got this professor friend at Chico State, wherever the heck that is. And I applied, I had an interview, I fell in love with this little town called Chico and moved across the country, and for me, the rest is history. So where did I get the bug? I knew that teaching, again, is passion, and I view leadership as teaching and teaching as leadership. And for me, as I got in and really started working with my students, and again, always being passionate about helping students be successful and strive toward their potential, it became clear to me that as a teacher in a high school, I could only impact my classes. As a university professor teaching people to be teachers, I could impact that many more. As a department chair, I could impact and help shape success for more students. Same as a dean, same as a provost. And now as president, I have to tell you, it is a great place to be with all of that emotional agility, only because now I can really help shape and transform direction at an institution that carries a lot more meaning in my mind. And so I'm happy with that. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay, good enough. Okay, then let's help me thank our presidents once again.
Thank you.
So it's been quite a morning, and now we will be moving to lunch, which will be next door. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we're trying something a little bit different because we know it's Friday and we know everybody needs to get out in a timely manner to avoid as much traffic as possible. So we do want to keep good conversations going. I will guide you through a little bit of guided conversation during lunch in a few minutes. But please go grab some food, sit down, relax, and enjoy. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We want to do a little bit of wrap up. And I thought I'd start by asking anyone if they have any thoughts to share about the day. Something that struck you, something that surprised you, something that made particular meaning for you. And while we're doing this, if anybody is so moved to just come up and write, please just raise your hand and get the attention of Catalina or Christine, and they'd be happy to give you a pen. So, any thoughts?
One thought that really struck me, I'm Jamie Wood from Mount St. Mary's University. One thought that really struck me in the video and then in talking at our tables was the numbers are discouraging, but the fact is those people were queens. They were, and we should laud that. And so it's really encouraging to see the queens and the and the presidents who have come before us. And so to really laud the women that are in our lives to do that and just make that really important. So laud ourselves, laud the women in our offices, in our teams, and so that the numbers are low, but if we can grow those people and reach back, that's really important. So that occurred to me today.
Yeah. Any other comments?
This was my first time coming here, and I just really appreciate the energy. When I was driving down here this morning, I was not so energetic. I think I left at 6. But it was an excellent program, and really appreciated the women in the room and kind of the encouragement from today.
I thought I'd share something I shared at my table as I was watching Tiffany and listening to her story. So a lot of times my brain works on multiple levels. I'm listening to the content, but I'm also observing. And I think that comes from being in education and being an observer and being an ethnographic qualitative researcher. I'm always looking and trying to figure out what's happening here. And as I watched Tiffany tell her story, I was just amazed at the notion that she had an idea and took that idea to actualization, right? She implemented it and it just became big. And that has been a continuing theme of her work and her creative process and the way she pulled people together, and it is now sustained, right? It is sustained to the point, and it is so broad and accessible that almost anyone who wishes to be part of something that she is doing has a pathway. That is incredibly powerful. I mean, I am committed to public higher education. I enjoy what I'm doing. I love being here at Cal State San Marcos. But that whole big picture was just amazing to me. And I thought, that's so cool. It's just so cool to see that. And so I'm really glad I had an opportunity to hear her work, to see some of her films, but just overall to see that example of taking dream to thought to action.
I'm Francisca Ber, Cal State San Bernardino. What surprised me is that we all feel the same way. When I'm listening to the ladies that became president, I just can hear my own fear and basically the same path and start as early as possible. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Second thing is, I heard a couple of stuff that maybe I had in my mind, but was not as clear as it should have been. And I will repeat to my campus that, yes, we transform families. So thank you.
Other thoughts? Oh, I have a hand right here.
I'm Maria Cano from Loyola Marymount University, and one of my biggest takeaways from today's event is abundance. And I think it's just so important that in a room full of women that we're talking about abundance, we thrive on that. And for me, it's not about what we don't have or what we can't do, but what we do have and what we can achieve. So for me, that was a major takeaway.
Hunter's coming over with a microphone.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Guzman from Azusa Pacific. This is my first conference, and I have to say I'm so inspired. Hearing other women who have charged before me as presidents, as social workers. Now I have a new idol. So I'm an LCSW. So, and I just it really confirmed for me that being in my role as a Title IX coordinator, as crazy as it sounds, I'm thriving. I'm in a season where my values align with the work that I do. And it really confirmed that even though my life seems really wonderfully crazy, I'm also a doctoral student and I have 2 small kids. But to hear, and we were curious to hear like the women who are in leadership, how do you do it with small kids, or do you do it with small kids? Because it's really a tough season, but it's very rewarding. But it was such a relief when somebody said, balance doesn't maintain, you never arrive. It's just for a blip. And to enjoy that blip really confirmed my reality. So I just want to say thank you for everybody's comments and for the panel and for Tiffany and her beautiful art. I really feel inspired. So thank you.
Any last comments, thoughts? Okay, then I think we will move on. Before we do, Sarah's going to offer some concluding thoughts and updates on the network. I did want to announce, I found out that has been launched a president's search at Cal State Dominguez Hills. So if any of you are so inspired and ready to make that leap, it is a fascinating campus, right? It is right in the heart of Los Angeles, serves an amazing student population, and clearly has some amazing faculty on the campus. And as well, Sarah Villarreal is the regional coordinator for the ACE network, and it is because of her leadership that we have this forum today. So would you join me in thanking Sarah for her work? That she didn't want flowers this year, so I listened to her and didn't bring flowers.
I'll be more specific.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Villarreal. I'm an Associate Vice President of Community Engagement here at CSUSM, and I'm honored to be your Southern California ACE Women's Network Regional Coordinator. I'd like to begin with just a few quick thank yous to Ellen Hawthorne and the Event and Conferencing Services and University Student Union teams. Thank you for all the behind-the-scenes work to make this event run so well. A ginormous thank you to Christine and Hunter for all your work. And special thanks to Bhumika, Kathleen, Noah, Marlene, Elvia, Catalina, and Cheryl. This was truly a team effort. Next, I wanted to update you about recent work being done in the network. In order to better understand your career aspirations, challenges to advancement, and desired networking and professional development activities, a group of our network's members have developed a survey instrument. This survey is also designed to allow us to identify how to better support our network's women of color. I believe at least a couple of them are in the audience. Judith Stephan Norris, Veronica Roman, and then Regina Eisenbach, who was here earlier and has left. Thank you for this work, and thank you in particular to Cheryl Landon for leading the design and analysis of this survey. We plan to disseminate the survey soon. Cheryl, early next month, yes? So please be on the lookout for that survey, and we hope you will support the effort by forwarding it to other women colleagues on your campus. Finally, I'd like to turn your attention to 2 items in your packet. There's a brief evaluation that we kindly request you take a couple of minutes to complete. We truly take your feedback into account when planning these forums, so thank you in advance for assisting us with that. And second, in your packets, in the folder pocket, you will find save the date cards for next year's Women's Leadership Forum, Thursday, October 18th and Friday, October 19th of 2018. We hope next year to grow this event again, and we need your help to do so. This is one way to move the needle. Talk to your colleagues about your experience at the forum and inspire them to join you next year. A couple of years ago, I saw a woman close a conference by creating a poem to summarize the day. So I have tried that now for 2 years, and I will do it again. It's become tradition. Also, it's tradition for me to say, please bear with me, this is less Walt Whitman and more Dr. Seuss. So. Okay. My fellow women in higher ed, when it feels as if inclusion, civility, and frankly, even human decency are dead, it is truly food for the soul to be in this room where love and hope are in full bloom. Today's forum invited us to think on a broad range of topics, from how these times feel biblical to how we can use film to support the radical, from unplugging an electronic Shabbat to how good character can be taught. I learned new things, and I'm sure you did too. Let's take a moment to reflect on a few. A herd of unicorns is called a blessing, and mentoring is still truly key to progressing. And when listening to Tiffany, I had quite the epiphany. I might want to try some leather pants. Well, maybe I'm still not bold enough to take that chance. There were calls to action. Focus not on scarcity, but rather on abundance. Never stop sharing your voice with pundits. Stand up and keep clapping on until all are standing and inequality is gone. Honor your truth. Teach critical analysis and communication skills to our youth. Find time off the grid for reflection, and free speech deserves our protection. The fireside chat generated a lot of conversation with thoughts about self-care, diversity, and the health of our nation. We transform families, said President Haynes, and after 23 years, she's still passionate about taking higher education to new planes. President Hutchinson said higher ed is the heart of community, and that we must focus on accessibility, affordability, and accountability to ensure equal opportunity. I'm a possibilitarian, announced President Blake, and advised us to acquire emotional agility and humor to ensure we don't break. I hope, like me, you feel refreshed and inspired to do that which we are required, to continue the fight for parity, equity, and all things right. Let's make that needle move, and the whole world may just improve. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll see you next year.